UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
And yes, good afternoon. Welcome back. Thank you to Alex. She's back tomorrow morning on breakfast. It is the home of common sense. There's a whole load of stuff to wade through this afternoon. As you'll be aware, MPs are set to vote in just over an hour on whether to progress a bill legalising assisted dying. This is in England and Wales. Campaigners saying it would give the terminally ill dignity in death. We're asking that question. When it comes to assisted dying, how should your MP vote? What's your message to your MP? 0344 499 1000. Also this afternoon, pro-Palestinian protesters have claimed responsibility for breaking into RAF Brize Norton and damaging 2 military planes. In an absolutely shocking breach of security. You might think you get your bits and pieces blown off if you Samira's cock your leg over the fence. Apparently not. Details on that. And Brits stuck in Israel say the Foreign Office has abandoned them to their fate by failing to help them flee from Iran's ballistic missile blitz. Well, you heard what our previous guest with Alex was saying on that a little earlier as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news is right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Welcome to a sunny, well, I say sunny, it's warm, it ain't that sunny, not where we are, but a lovely summer's day, I think we can pretty much say, right here on Talk. But amidst the backdrop of rays and hot temperatures, there's some serious business going on in Parliament, and it's arguably one of the most contentious issues of our time. Legalise euthanasia, as some call it. To put it in cold but obvious terms, you reach that stage of no return. Your terminal illness means you've got little time left and you want to end it now. Why should anyone stand in the way of that simple request? All the usual cliches apply. If you had a sick pet that wasn't going to make it, that's exactly what you would do, but you're not allowed to do that for your own life, etc. There are powerful arguments, though, on both sides of this, and as we speak, MPs are in the final hour of that debate. This is a private member's Kim Ledbetter bill. They're debating it. Will it elevate? Will this vote elevate it to its next stage? The issue doesn't fully divide down party lines, although it's fair to say that in the past we usually see Tories vote against it and Labour in favour. But it does seem that things are sort of changing on this one because many Labour MPs are turning against this bill. It's actually called the Assisted Dying Bill, the Terminal Ill Adults End of Life Bill. Returned to the Commons today, of course, and is set to become law if enough MPs back it in this historic vote. Under the bill, terminally ill adults expected to die within 6 months could seek medical assistance to end their lives. Initially passed by 55 votes back in November. However, today's vote is sort of in knife-edge territory, really, after a series of controversies about changes to the bill that critics say weaken the proposed law. We've had a crock of Labour MPs who were backing the bill, but yesterday announced they were switching to vote it down. I get it. I think we all get it. You think, OK, if I was in that position and I wasn't in great nick and clearly there was about, 2 or 3 months left and my state of life was just horrendous, it might even be painful. But even if you take that out of it, it was, do you want to be hanging around? There's no way you're going to ever make it. Then, of course, you go, well, yeah, I should have the right to, take a swig of something or a brief injection to just bring that inevitable a little closer. Why should I not be allowed to have that? But, of course, when you then hand over that kind of incredible, almost godlike authority to the state, you have to examine every sinew of possibility, of ramification, of implication. So there are moral questions attached to this. It sort of follows the same lines as the abortion debate to a degree. But there's also the abuse element of this. Could it be abused? Maybe not now, maybe not next week or even in the next 10 years down the line. when people modify the bill? What will it mean? Will 6 months turn into a year? Will it go from terminal illness to just illness? So the questions are plentiful. The answer is a little trickier because I think most people's instinct is, well, it's up to you, isn't it? If you put it like that, yeah. But that's not really the kind of solitary grounds for debating this. There's much more involved, and it is right that it's given lots of parliamentary time to be scrutinised and debate. My instinct is that this will get over the line, but it won't be with the same impressive majority that perhaps it would have done a few weeks or a month or so back. We will wait and see. We have Henry Hill with us, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, to talk about this and the other big stories of the day. Henry, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Always nice to have you with us. So they've begun that debate, and many turning against this bill, as we've been discussing. Many urging colleagues to vote down the plan. Let's have a listen, though. I think it's only fair. The person who initiated this whole potential law, Kim Ledbetter, the Labour MP, speaking about her confidence in the vote.
Look, we had a good majority at second reading. I think it was 55 majority. There might be some small movement in the middle. Some people might change their mind one way, others will change their mind the other way. But fundamentally, I don't anticipate that majority would be heavily eroded. So I do feel confident we can get through tomorrow successfully.
So she's confident, but let's have a listen to Tory leader Kemi Badenoch also speaking on this about her plans for the bill.
This bill is a bad bill. It is not going to deliver. It has not been done properly. This is not how we should put through legislation like this. I don't believe that the NHS and other services are ready to carry out assisted suicide. So I'll be voting no, and I hope as many Conservative MPs as possible will be supporting me in that.
And Henry, I said at the beginning, it's not exclusively divided between Tory and Labour, but historically there has been a sort of a general sense that Tories vote against it, Labour in favour.
There has. Essentially, there's a small core of Conservative MPs, and there's quite a lot of overlap between the two, who are supporting this bill. And there's a lot of overlap with the ones who recently voted with Labour to essentially decriminalise abortion up to birth. So there is a sort of liberal, very, very liberal caucus inside the Parliamentary Conservative Party, but it is mostly Labour. It is interesting that we are seeing most of the leadership on the people changing their votes coming from Labour MPs. Amusingly or worryingly, depending on your point of view, there was an effort yesterday to try and create the impression that some people were switching their votes the other way. Emily Thornberry on Newsnight spoke at considerable length about how she had changed her mind and was now going to support this bill. Unfortunately, Hansard shows that she actually voted for it at second reading. So Newsnight has now deleted that message. But yeah, it's not a strictly partisan issue, but it is nonetheless, given the size of the government's majority, a mostly party line split.
Lots of powerful speeches, and what I find interesting about it, I'm sure you've found the same as well, Henry, on this. On both sides, there are really powerful speeches, and I think if you are sort of sitting there taking an objective look on this, most MPs are taking this correctly, very, very seriously. And, whether you're James Cleverly, he's very much against it, very impassioned words from him, and others who are very much for it, and again, with their own, personal stories as to why.
That's true, in as much as interventions in the chamber go. It's obviously a very emotional issue. This sort of policy area often is. I think in general, though, that the way that Parliament has handled this legislation has been fairly disgraceful. It should not have been a private member's bill. It is essentially, Sir Keir Starmer has given this bill his official support, but it's made it a PMB, which means that Ledbetter has essentially Ledbetter has been outsourced control over this entire bill.
Yeah.
So the bill was not published until barely a week or two before it was due to be announced in Parliament. There were no pre-assessments by the Department of Health or anyone else. There has been a concerted effort to exclude evidence from countries like Canada, where assisted dying or euthanasia has gone very badly wrong. I don't know if you saw yesterday, but there were reports that Labour peers are absolutely furious because some Labour MPs who have very deep reservations about the legislation are privately indicating to Labour peers that they're going to vote for it and then hope the House of Lords figures it out. So in terms of
just throwing it over to another system, to the other place.
Exactly. And again, this is a danger of it being a private member's bill, because normally with government legislation, there's a whole process called ping pong where the different houses can send it back and forth and there is more time. As it stands, the House of Lords would be under enormous pressure because if they run out of so-called sitting Fridays, which is Fridays in which this bill can be considered, the bill simply falls. Yeah. And the House of Lords does not like killing legislation which has passed the House of Commons. So the Lords will essentially have very little leverage or time to actually fix this legislation if there are MPs who are voting for it effectively in bad conscience.
What is your gut on this, Henry? How do you think this will turn out in terms of this vote in around about just over an hour, in fact?
My instinct is that it will pass. I think that generally the people who are changing their minds are more vocal than the people who maybe have doubts but are sticking with it. I do think it's significant that so many MPs have been prepared to change their minds, and they are correct. The letter from several Labour MPs that went out pointing out that this is a very different and much weaker bill than was voted on and secured that majority at second reading. Things like the sign-off by a High Court judge have been essentially stripped out of it. There have been very worrying signs. Kim Ledbetter said that she'd closed the so-called anorexia loophole, which would have meant accepting an amendment, Amendment 38, which she did not then accept. And when pressed on this, she said, well, I thought Amendment 14 did that. It does not. Slightly worrying that she didn't know that. So I think it will pass. I think the House of Lords will probably then, although I don't think they should in these circumstances, allow it to go to the statute book. And I think that then we will probably in a few years' time have quite serious scandal about when the practical consequences of this bill come to be felt. And I say that as someone who supports the principle of assisted dying, by the way. I just think that this is a horribly drafted bill.
Well, we will watch with interest. And, of course, we'll bring the results of that vote live as it happens right here on Talk. Let's move to this story. This is a disturbing story, Henry. Pro-Palestinian protesters breaking in to an RAF base, for goodness sake. RAF Brize Norton. They damaged 2 military planes. The idea that you could get that close or even shin up a fence is extraordinary. Let's have a listen to Reform MP Sarah Pochin. She was speaking on this issue, giving her reaction to Alex earlier this morning.
You know what I'd do with them? I'd send them back to where they've come from, British citizens or not. I'd strip them of their British citizenship because this is treason, and I'd send them back to wherever they've come from. But the point is, this is not, as you say, like we get on a daily basis outside Parliament, just, you know, your professional protesters. These are hardcore criminals that are committing treason and need to be treated very, very severely.
I mean, I get what she's saying there, Henry, but of course they could have come from Cleethorpes, so I'm not quite sure what would happen there. But the principle is that Sarah Pochin was advancing there. This is incredibly serious, a huge breach of security.
It's what security? What security? This is the thing. We say it's incredibly serious, a huge breach of security, but clearly there wasn't any. There was a fence, yes. And they climbed the fence. There were no sentries. Yeah. There were no sentries, right? You know, I think, generally speaking, we pride ourselves on being a fairly kind of laid-back country when it comes to law enforcement. But I think that having armed guards at military bases is a bit of a no-brainer. And if you see somebody actively sabotaging British assets at a point at which we are squaring up for potential military action in the Middle East, you know, there should be guards, right? And if those people get injured in the course of preventing them committing that crime, then play stupid games, win stupid prizes. It is an extraordinary policy failure. And of course, you know, we haven't heard about the base commander's resignation. We don't even know if it's his fault. Maybe there's some new policy guideline in the Royal Air Force that says that you're not allowed to have guards on your bases for some reason or other. But there needs to be. This is a humiliation, right? Because it's not just you know, you and I can be angry, and those jets are incredibly expensive, and that's all taxpayers' money, and the defence budget already isn't big enough, and all the rest of it. But this will have been seen around the world, right? And it will have been seen by Russia, it will have been seen by Iran, it will have been seen by essentially any country with hostile intentions which might want to deplete Britain's ability to project power around the world. And now they know, you know, you saw that Iranian strike on the Russian Air Force, which took months of planning and carefully smuggling a large number of combat drones in containers and all the rest of it. I mean, if anyone wanted to do that to us, apparently what they need is some secateurs and a couple of electric scooters. Yeah,
that seems to be it. And even if there weren't, you know, physical guards at every point of the perimeter, you'd have thought some kind of, alarm. Somebody once told me if you try to dip your toe over the barbed wire at Buckingham Palace, all manner of things go off, and some pretty burly characters come out and pull you down. Now, you'd assume that on a military base where there is, as you say, military aircraft that is, in situ, potentially ready to take off at any time, you might think that, there'd be an alarm of some sort, big floodlights like you might see suddenly get turned on, and before you know it, there's a crock of characters out there putting you up against a wall. But apparently nothing on this, absolutely nothing. We'll watch with interest to see what the official responses are, and as you rightly alluded to, Henry, whether anybody's head actually rolls on this one. Henry Hill is with us, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. We'll talk more to Henry in a couple of moments' time. We're also asking the question, and I know it's a pretty grim territory when you're talking about assisted dying. It's not the bubbliest of subjects on a sunny Friday afternoon, but it happens to be taking place right now in the mother of all parliaments. It's a Friday sitting, it's a private member's bill, hence, and there they are discussing it. Powerful voices on both sides of this discussion, for and against, and in around about an hour, they will vote. Your MP will be voting. So how do you want your MP to vote? What's your advice to your MP right now, an hour before they walk into that chamber of democracy and make their decision on an unprecedented, extremely serious, potentially dangerous, others would say not before time, bill such as assisted dying? 0344 499 1000. We'll have more from you, more from Henry Hill in a couple of moments' time. We'll talk Trump and other issues too. Right now, 1:20, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I think there are very few areas of life, by the way, where people go, yeah, if you got shot by the police or the military, that's absolutely fine, outside of war, if you like. But looking at the inbox on these protesters, that legged it over a fence at Brize Norton and managed to make their way to a military aircraft and cause damage to it. I think pretty much everyone's saying, you know, how are these people not shot? I mean, you might think military aircraft, arguably stocked and ready to go, or certainly potentially, and a couple of chances and they get over a fence and get to the plane. I mean, nobody will be facing any charges if somebody had shot the protesters. You might think this would be, you know, almost the clearest, most unequivocal example of where it would be completely fair game that the military would fire on somebody like that. Let's go and get some more stories. Henry Hill is with us, Deputy Editor at Conservative Home. Donald Trump, connected, of course, to all matters war-based right now. Henry, lots going on there. He's offered Iran a last chance, it seems, to make a bit of a deal to end its nuclear programme. Let's listen to Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, speaking on behalf of the president yesterday.
Now, regarding the ongoing situation in Iran, I know there has been a lot of speculation amongst all of you in the media regarding the president's decision-making and whether or not the United States will be directly involved. In light of that news, I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today.
So there it is. I mean, we often look at Donald Trump, Henry, and say, well, you know, he's playing this kind of curious game of 3D chess or something. Maybe it is that, and this kind of window, you've got a couple of weeks, is quite clever. In that time, Iran will fire a few missiles here and there, but ultimately, if they've got any sense, they'll stop there.
Yeah, it's a sign, I think, of one, the fact that there clearly was not a fully worked out plan in advance between Israel and the United States on this. Israel went in, America was initially distancing itself. Then last week, we saw Trump starting to row in behind the Israeli position, perhaps because, you know, whether you supported it or not, the die is cast now. And I think this represents maybe a realization that actually to properly, completely dismantle the Iranian nuclear program, especially, and I can't remember the name of the site, but there is an enrichment site deep underground which produces the enriched nuclear fuel, will require a ground operation.
Yeah.
And a ground operation is a big step forward for any of this. It's very easy for Western countries who've got quite used to it, essentially just bombing countries from the air. But sending in even special forces to go and completely destroy a well-protected facility in Iran is a Rubicon which Trump may cross, but he's clearly wary about crossing, and so he is giving the Iranian regime basically space in the hope that they will back down. Of course, for an aggressive authoritarian regime like the Iranian one, it is incredibly unlikely that they're going to do this, right? They've been humiliated over the past year, 18 months. They have had their entire network of proxies around Israel smashed. The Syrian regime, which they were supporting, has fallen. Now Israel has basically stripped back all of their air defenses and started demolishing their very expensive nuclear program. The odds of them folding voluntarily to this kind of pressure are low. And then it's going to be a very difficult question for the president, because he's now, you know, Trump is a macho man, right? He believes in saving face. And so now that he's laid down these ultimata to Tehran, I think it's actually very unlikely, unless by some miracle the Ayatollahs are like, look, all right, here's footage of us demolishing our hugely expensive underground enrichment facility, that he will be able to avoid at least backing Israel when it goes in.
I sense you're bang on the money there, Henry. That's exactly what's going to happen. Let's just move to a final story here. J.K. Rowling getting more stick from, frankly, those that should know better. This time, Stephen Fry has entered the fray on the back of, Daniel, what's-his-face, Radcliffe, and Emma Watson, goodness knows who else, those that J.K. Rowling made famous in many respects. So Stephen Fry said J.K. Rowling has been radicalised by TERFs and believes she's now a lost cause. He accused her of mocking LGBT plus people and hardening her views in response to online vitriol. Henry.
I mean, it's always slightly condescending when somebody insists that somebody else hasn't really formed their own views on a subject, but has instead had them injected by some nefarious external force. I do think that it's certainly true to an extent that if you receive the volume of abuse that J.K. Rowling received as a high-profile woman who spoke out on this issue, deeply misogynistic, hateful abuse and threats, then that will harden people's positions. Because of course it would. It would happen to you or me, right? It's hard to maintain that sense of equanimity and a respect and affection for the other side when they are sending you death threats and all the rest of it. But there's ultimately also just a huge ingratitude to this, right? Not only has J.K. Rowling formed her views legitimately and expressed them, I think, completely acceptably, but she's the reason that most of those actors are famous at all.
Yep.
Right? Stephen Fry was Stephen Fry before he got to narrate the Harry Potter audiobooks, but I'm sure it's not done him any harm either. And for all of them to have ganged up essentially and denounced and disowned J.K. Rowling in this way when they've all done so well as a result of her talent is, I think, fairly shameful. And
I thought the fact that he accused her of mocking LGBT plus people was, well, nothing short of, frankly, a lie, because it's only the T that is relevant to this debate. It's nothing to do with gay or lesbian people in any shape or form. But, you know, don't let that inconvenient fact stand in the way. J.K. Rowling has a very specific position, and her position is not what she's against, it's what she's for. And it's the fact is she's for safe spaces for women and the immovable definition of what a woman is. She retains those positions. She does so with intelligence and sometimes with some humour, but undoubtedly there is a very firm, very serious, well thought through intellectual message in what she's saying. She's not Jim Davidson doing some cheap gay jokes at the end of a pier. This is someone who has a genuine cause that she feels strongly about and articulates it rather well.
Exactly. I think also what this sometimes represents is a very dreary tactic, which is where she will sometimes mock the people giving her abuse online, right? She'll mock them specifically or their argument. And because many of them will be some combination of LGB or T, that some people then go, look, she's mocking LGBT people. And it's like, no, she's not mocking them as a category. Yes. She isn't even, as far as I'm aware, she's not mocking trans people as a category either, right? Yeah. I don't think that she is anti-trans in that sense, from what I've seen.
No.
But she is mocking a specific person. I don't know. Sometimes if you're having an argument with a particular bad faith sort of political opponent, and you see something, you're arguing with a woman, and go, is that how you talk to women? It's like, no. It's how I talk to you, because you're advancing a very bad argument.
When a bloke with a beard makes a video and a voice like you or I and says, I'm as much or more of a woman than you are, J.K. Rowling, you just think, this is a classic example of how the world's gone absolutely bonkers. It's that kind of area that she's got no time for at all, and rightly so, yeah?
Absolutely. And it's really, again, it's just worth reiterating, it's really unfortunate how people like that person you've just described have set back the cause of general trans acceptance, right? Because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you'd have been very surprised. I'd have been very surprised to find many people who felt very strongly at all about it. If you had somebody who asked you to call them exactly. Now, because some people were absolutely determined to fight to the death on putting male rapists in the female prison estate and other completely indefensible things, which the vast majority of trans people don't care about, they have generated this enormous furore and made winning general acceptance, which I think you and I and most people completely support, much harder to achieve.
Henry, listen, thank you for being with us. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the sunshine. It's going to be out there in full force. That's Henry Hill. He's deputy editor over there at Conservative Home. You might have an opinion on the J.K. Rowling story. The mockery and well, it's not even mockery. Mockery sort of sounds fairly innocuous and almost comedic in some respects. I mean, we're talking death threats and threats of sexual violence, the kind of stuff that just happens very easily online, and we all know what. It's funny, I got a load of nonsense. You know those moments when an old tweet or an old video of something suddenly resurfaces, and you think, what's just come back up again? It was an argument I had, I can't remember the guy's name now, but it was about Iran, strangely enough. It was probably a few weeks ago. And it was done and dusted, and we had a row, and he was saying, you know, Iran is a very nice place, and don't, you know, they're the good guys, we're all the bad guys, usual argument. And I obviously, you know, attempted to school this man in the ridiculousness of his words. But of course, those that support him pathologically somehow have decided they don't just hate me, they want my death. And I thought, that's really interesting. And you get accused of being all sorts of things. Apparently a sex offender for having a different view Iran than some of these characters. But that's what social media does to people's brains. And, you know, J.K. Rowling gets this like times a million on a daily basis. And that's not... It's that area she often mocks as well. As I often say in these kind of arguments, is what she's pro, not what she's against. And that's just the basic rights of women and the identity of what a woman is, which is not up for negotiation. Simple stuff, really. 0344 499 1000. We're going to go back to the assisted dying question as well, which we asked right at the beginning. How should your MP vote? They vote in around about just shy of an hour. We'll bring you the result of that live here on the programme. This will be law-changing and game-changing, but there are worried voices on both sides. But what do you want your MP to do in 60 minutes' time in the House of Commons? Our lines are open, 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Sue in Wolverhampton, who says, Ian, speaking as someone who's 70 plus, I have no strong feelings about the euthanasia bill, although there's a time for us all to go and it'd be good to have a choice in it. However, I'm horrified by the infanticide bill, which legalises the murder of babies. This was, of course, earlier on in the week when MPs voted to change abortion laws to stop women in England and Wales being prosecuted for ending their pregnancy. I think this is not the strict laws on abortion itself, but if you were to, I don't know, you know, take a drink or a drug that would terminate your pregnancy, previously you could have faced, you know, serious action for that. I think it's that bit that is decriminalised that aspect of it. I had a miscarriage at 26 weeks, says Sue, and it was a baby I lost, not a fetus. I'm sorry to hear that, Sue, but I think the rest of what you said is absolutely spot on. John in Sutton, I'm a devout Christian. I believe doctors should be duty-bound to help people to pass who are at death's door and in agony. It's an act of mercy. If we have it in our gift to help fellow human beings avoid an agonising death, then we should do. Thank you, John, for that. What MPs have filled a packed Commons chamber over the last few hours to debate the third reading of the assisted dying bill. The result expected within the hour. Campaigners have also gathered outside Parliament, making final appeals both for and against the change. It's really, really interesting diverging views on this. A hugely controversial subject, of course. And it should be controversial. It was the Labour MP, Kim Ledbetter, who introduced the bill, says if it doesn't pass now, it may be years before we have another chance. In a moment, we'll talk to the organisation My Death, My Decision. But first, Mark Harper, former Tory MP and Cabinet Minister. Mark, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. I said at the very beginning of the show, you know, this invariably has sort of divided down party, not completely divided down party lines, but it's sort of most Conservatives usually against and Labour usually for. What's your position?
So my position is informed very much by my past history as a disability minister and listening to disabled people. What this bill profoundly does is change how we look at life. So my worry about it and the fact that it's not supported by a single organisation that represents disabled people. The thing they're worried about is that it starts getting to a country where you start looking at whether someone's life's worth living, whether we should invest the resources in helping them live independently, helping them live good lives, whether we should help people who are suffering with palliative care, or whether it all becomes a bit easier and cheaper to make sure they're not here. And they're worried that this is a slippery slope. It profoundly changes that conversation. That's what they're worried about, and that's why not a single organisation representing disabled people backs this bill.
And that, for many people, would be it. But, of course, you'd think based on that, Mark, what you've just said makes complete sense, and that would compel most people to sympathise with that side of this discussion. It sounds insensitive to talk about sides, but, you know, there are invariably two sides to this one. But then, of course, you do hear very passionate views on the other side of this. Has there ever been a wobble with your thoughts on this, where you thought, well, maybe I do understand the other side?
Well, I do understand the other side, and I've had constituents with views on both sides of this argument. The problem is this is one of these issues where you have competing rights. So I heard your caller earlier talked about helping people who are suffering, or rather have a terminal diagnosis, which of course is not the same thing as suffering, end their life. The problem is, if to grant that right, you put at risk the lives of many thousands, hundreds of thousands of vulnerable and disabled people, you have to then say, is that a choice you want to make? And that's what MPs are faced with. This vote today is not about the principle either. It's about this particular bill. And there are lots of MPs who support the principle of assisted dying, but think this particular bill is terrible, hasn't got any of the safeguards in it that people wanted. The House of Commons just voted this morning to not put in a safeguard that would have meant that if your only reason for wanting to end your life was that you felt that you were a burden or for financial reasons, that wouldn't have allowed you to use this. They voted that down. So it's about this bill. This bill as it stands allows somebody who feels they're a burden or life would be better for other people if they weren't here to access assisted suicide. And I think that's wrong. And that's why I hope in just under an hour MPs vote not to proceed with it.
But of course, Kim Ledbetter and others would say there are safeguards in place, though, Mark, that would stop that, because you've still got to get through. It was going to be a panel of High Court judges, now some doctors, but nonetheless qualified people. And then you've got to get somebody to administer it. So there might be others within the equation, despite your request as the patient, that profoundly disagree.
Well, let me pick up the safeguards point. So when this bill was originally voted on, there was a strong safeguard, which was a High Court judge had to rule on the case and listen to evidence. That was taken out. You now have a panel which doesn't even have to see the person concerned. They can do it all with written paperwork. And one of the experts on that panel is a psychiatrist, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, which is neutral on the principle of assisted dying, is against this bill because it says this bill does not have the necessary safeguards. So the professionals who would be involved in having to administer this process don't think this bill has the right safeguards in place. So even if you support the principle of assisted dying and assisted suicide, this particular bill, and that's what MPs are voting on this afternoon, they're not voting on the principle anymore, they're voting on the specific legislation. The experts don't think it has the safeguards.
In terms of this private member status, I mean, that's, of course, part of our democracy, and, you know, it might mean MPs have got to go to work on a Friday, perish the thought. But nonetheless, it's got a, it's got a different set of kind of regulations around it. Some say too much wiggle room. Do you think, in a way, that dilutes something, given the seriousness of this?
My own view is that the process, I think, has been flawed. It should be a free vote. It should absolutely be up to MPs' consciences about how they vote. And there are people from all parties with different views. But I think the process, this should have been a government bill done by the government, with all the proper resources to support it. I think expecting a single member of parliament to steer it through was a mistake. In the end, if this gets through, the government's going to be responsible for delivering the service. This bill means changing the founding principles of the NHS away from a service that helps preserve life. And in the end, I think the government, if it wanted to have this, it should have taken responsibility and done it. Doing it through a private member's bill, I think, was fatally flawed. Yeah.
We just had a text from somebody called Becca who says MPs voting for themselves, not for the people of Britain. It should be a referendum. I know we can have that argument all day long as to what should and shouldn't be a referendum. There are some countries that have extended referendum into more sort of regular policy decisions. Is it of such significance that something like this should go to the country, as it were, Mark?
No, look, I believe that it should be decided by members of parliament, and I think MPs, to be fair, on both sides of the argument, have taken this very seriously. But it's not just about the principle. I think you could ask the public about the principle, but if you're going to ask people to vote on legislation, it's about the detail. And I don't think it's realistic to expect every member of the public to spend hours and hours and hours wading through the details of legislation. It's the job of MPs to do that and to make sure the detail has all the right safeguards in it. And that's where I think this bill, even if you support the principle, is fatally flawed.
Yeah, it's about the technicalities of the bill, as it were. Yeah. Mark, thank you very much indeed. Mark Harper, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, of course, thank you to him. Let's speak to Carmen Sumidawira, who is Director of My Death, My Decision. Carmen, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. You heard what Mark was saying there, and of course we are talking about the technicalities of a bill as distinct from the principle. But nonetheless, it's naturally leads us into discussing the principle of assisted dying. Just give us, I can guess from the name of your organisation, where you stand on this, but do you sympathise with the other argument that if the bill isn't correct, then there is potential abuse and no state should ever be endorsing something that could potentially go horribly wrong?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, the clue's in the name. I very much believe that, it is my death and therefore my decision as to how I would like to end my life. And I agree that there is a real need for precaution and safeguards in this bill. And I'm very confident that actually in the process of the private members bill, many safeguards have been put in place. The panel that you alluded to actually consists of a social worker, a psychiatrist, and a senior legal professional that could be an ex-judge. Some say it's watered down, but what I would say is interdisciplinary work in this way is a really good way where different people with a different point of view can assess whether this person has the capacity and sustained wish for an assisted death. It also needs 2 independent medical professionals to look at the same case. And that's a total of 5 individuals that have to sign off on this before an assisted death can take place.
What is your hope for this afternoon? I mean, this is, for many, many years, I mean, this is the recent Ledbetter bill, the private members bill, but of course not the first time this has been discussed. What's your hope for within the hour when they vote? I mean, clearly you want them to want this to pass, but does it need to pass so compellingly that would make the difference to you?
My hope is that the MPs today look at, and I know you mentioned the general public earlier, we might not have a referendum, but we do have very accurate polling. And even yesterday, we saw that a YouGov poll suggests that 73% of the UK public, a representative group of the UK public, support the bill as it stands, not just in principle. And so to me, MPs need to be in line with public opinion, which has been quite, stable for many, many years. And so this is a really historic moment for MPs to basically give the people what they want.
Yeah. Oregon is often mentioned, as you will be aware, as the kind of sort of totemic example of how an assisted dying bill can work with, as I understand it, little or no controversy, none of the kind of potential bear traps that people have warned against. Does this bill completely replicate Oregon, though?
I wouldn't be able to speak to the absolute intricacies of the Oregon bill. So,
but you're familiar with the comparison.
I'm familiar with the comparison, and what I would say is that we're very lucky in that international evidence across multiple countries shows us that assisted dying bills basically have no evidence of things like coercion, of things like manipulation. So Switzerland has had their bill for over 80 years. And that's a long time to be able to collect data and understand the workings of these kinds of mechanisms.
Sorry, how many years did you say Switzerland have had this bill?
80.
80. Wow. Good.
80.
I had no idea. So we learn something every day. They've never had, because the scenario, as you know, Carmen, is, Granny's got a few quid in the bank and, a little gentle nudge, come on, Gran, take the potion, that kind of thing. There is, as far as you know, no evidence of this happening anywhere.
No, absolutely not. And, I myself was a nurse in the NHS and, we all health workers in the NHS are trained very rigorously to assess capacity. And, capacity means that you yourself must have this sustained wish. You have to reconfirm that wish again with a medical professional down the line. And the panel also has to be convinced that you have the capacity to make this choice. So I don't see a very high risk of coercion in this space.
Listen, Carmen, thank you for your time. Appreciate that. Carmen Sudi-Wiera, Director of My Death, My Decision. There are two distinct sides on this, and I know, as Mark Harper was saying, he knows his way around the parliamentary system. This is about approving the bill as the bill being fit for purpose to be the one that would eventually become law. But ultimately, what is being debated are the pros and cons, the rights, the wrongs on both sides of this. And again, what I said at the beginning, which I hope is reasonable, when you ask, should you have the right to choose your time of death if you're terminally ill and in some sort of pain, take a potion, go to sleep. I don't think anyone, when put like that, disagrees with that. But this all comes down to the state allowing it to happen and the state giving it the green light and the potential abuse. Our last guest, Carmen, said no evidence around the planet of abuse. And she said that Switzerland have had this in place for 80 years. Man, I had no idea that was the case. They were debating this just shy of the war. Extraordinary. 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. How do you want your MP to vote on this afternoon? This is Talk.
You're absolutely right. I want to come home, but I can't because there's no safe route home from Israel to London.
That's crazy. What do you think will happen now? Have you actually at any point spoken to a human being at the Foreign Office?
No, we've not, and we've registered that there are family members and people that we're with who are vulnerable or elderly and need to get home. Yeah, and I have to say, as you mentioned, I'm a councillor, and I've been in touch with my local member of parliament and other colleagues that work in that world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This from Becky, who says, interesting on the Switzerland factoid that they've had assisted dying for 80 years. Switzerland had an assisted dying bill 30 years almost before women got the right to vote in federal elections. Yeah, when you put it like that, wow. How did they get onto the dying thing before they got onto the women voting? And nearly 50 years before women had the right to vote in effectively our council elections. Not certain I base my opinions based on anything Switzerland do, says Becky. This one from Alan, who says, my assisted suicide is already happening. My friend had motor neurone disease. He told his doctor he was going to turn off his breathing apparatus on a certain day, no matter what. So the doctor or the nurse gave him a drip and increased the dose by the hour. He dozed off peacefully. That's interesting. They would have been able to do that within the framework of law, of course, of saying, yeah, well, that's the dose that was required. Let's talk to Jill in Cornwall on this point. Jill, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Hi, Ian. Well, I've just come through the sort of cancer pathway. I've had a couple of years of treatment. I've had some surgery and also, the various different things that go with the surgery. And now I'm sort of through it. But there have been times within my illness where that thought of not wanting to suffer, not wanting family to suffer, does go through your mind, and you sort of think, yes, if I get the opportunity, yes, I probably would take assisted dying. Yeah. But my concern is that, as with everything that we pass and say we're going to do, and it all starts off very good, there always comes a situation where, maybe they might think that after 80, people need to go. People with mental illness need to go.
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And supposedly this bill does, address all of that, but who knows where we might be in 10 years' time.
Well, exactly, and I mean, it doesn't reassure anyone that it will stay just for people like myself and that to make that choice. If it gets into the wrong hands and it becomes a law, then what is to stop it from going from an option to?
I 100% agree with you, although most of the people who support the bill say, there's no examples of that happening anywhere else. Who knows? I don't know. You only need it to happen once. Is it as much a moral question, Jill, in terms of our right to play God, as it were? Or is that largely in irrelevance to this, unless you happen to be, a very devout kind of person?
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think morals come into it. I think if you're in a situation where you could die because of what you're suffering with, I think that it will pass through everyone's mind as to whether or not they want to do it in the open with everyone watching, or whether they want to go off somewhere quiet and do it. I mean, I don't think it comes under anything other than if you're in that situation where your life could be expiring because of the fact that you're not well. And it's not something that you think about when you're sort of, healthy.
No, exactly. Yeah, you don't sort of I mean, you might have a vague view on it, but you're absolutely right. When it comes to that crunch, you're in very different territory. Jill, thank you very much indeed for that. Simon says, I use the following as a mere example of my point. The cost of a cycle of chemotherapy is around £4,000, while assisted dying costs under £200. I fear the economic pressures put upon a cash-strapped health service. What with the vote to decriminalise full-term abortion, I fear the only functioning public service offered by an economically declining British state will be death. A very dark and unchristian week ahead, says Simon in Devon. That is, in part the moral point. Nadine Nadine, good afternoon to you. Whereabouts are you?
Hi, sorry, in North Ayrshire. Hi,
North
Ian.
Ayrshire.
Hi.
Nice to have you with us. Good afternoon.
Hi, always love listening to you. Hello. I wanted to bring the subject back to Brize Norton, rather than the assisting dying. One basic fact that hasn't really been talked about is that the primary reason why these jets at Brize Norton are sitting there is to protect us, the UK, before all else. So in the event that we're obviously, when we're not in active combat with another country, they are, of course, there to be used to assist other operations, which are themselves protecting the same values we believe in, not forgetting that Israel is the only democracy in that region. So I wonder whether these individuals, which call themselves Palestinian activists, and I call terrorists, I bring back to the fact that Starmer has called this an act of vandalism. Very, very.
That's a very generous way to describe breaking into a military base, isn't it?
I mean, it's incredibly serious and incredibly worrying for me that he has called it that. It is an act of terrorism, not an act of vandalism. And that brings me to the fact that I will be looking with great attention to see how they are sentenced and how quickly is this going to happen.
There's a possibility there won't be even a court case on this.
I mean, that would be absolutely horrendous.
It'd be extraordinary. It might be you did very badly, you trespassed, and here's what do they call it, a caution, and away you go. I certainly hope something as serious as this. Nadine, I've got to move for time, but no other reason. Thank you for that. Indeed, Davies makes this point. Davies is Palestinian activist at Brize Norton. If these idiots are caught, they should be given whole life sentences. It is an act of terrorism. You broke into a military base and vandalised military planes. I mean, who knows how that could have ended? It's just extraordinary that nobody seemed to shine a spotlight. As you imagine a big old siren goes off, and 100 blokes come out with guns and say, right, you've got 2 seconds to stop. If not, we're going to blow your kneecaps off. Apparently not. More coming from you on the other side of the news at 2, which is next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is
Yeah, good afternoon. Coming up on 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. MPs, as you know, are still debating ahead of that vote within the hour on whether to progress a bill legalising assisted dying. This applies to England and Wales, with campaigners saying it would give the terminally ill a dignity in death. They haven't voted yet. What advice would you give to your MP who's going to be walking through one door or the other inside the next 30 minutes? How do you want them to vote? Also this afternoon, pro-Palestinian protesters have claimed responsibility for breaking into RAF Brize Norton and damaging 2 military planes. In a shocking breach of security, apparently they nipped in there on an electric scooter. I mean, is it that easy to get into a top military base and start monkeying around with a military plane? I mean, you really couldn't make this stuff up. And Brits stuck in Israel say the Foreign Office has abandoned them to their fate by failing to help them flee from Iran's ballistic missile blitz. We'll be speaking to one person who's currently stuck in Israel, desperately trying to get out. We're doing that within this hour. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This one from Cliff, who says, afternoon Cliff, by the way, says, I think it's wrong to describe the criminals who attacked the military base as vandals. It's more than protest, more than criminal damage. It's sabotage. During the last World War, they'd had the death penalty. It takes half-wittery to a new level. Yeah, half-wittery on whose behalf? The military that should... Is there some commander of that base that can't keep it safe enough that you can ride an e-scooter? An e-scooter into a military base and whip out your spanners and start messing around with a military aircraft. It's just extraordinary. On assisted dying, Carol says, I've recently been diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. Had surgery which was successful 8 weeks ago, and I'm starting chemo next week just to make sure there were no stray cancer cells that were missed. Hopefully I won't be facing end of life for a good while yet, but I have thought about it. As a qualified nurse who's nursed end-of-life lung cancer patients, I know that it can be incredibly painful. Usually doctors can control it with morphine, increasing it as needed. But there are also times when the pain is never fully under control. That terrifies me. I don't want my kids seeing me like this. I would much rather be able to choose when the time is right to say goodbye. It's a worry that assisted dying could be abused, but it can also give people a beautiful pain-free death with their loved ones all around them. Thank you for all your hard work. Carol, thank you very much. I'm delighted to hear that you got through an incredibly serious operation. Sounds like you're well on your way out the other side as well. But I would imagine in that position, well, in fact, you can guarantee anyone in that position that Carol's just found themselves in, you'd have that conversation, even if it was only with yourself, wouldn't you? You know, what would I do? And I absolutely share Carol's view. The thought of my kids seeing me distressed and in pain is enough to, I mean, you'd do anything for your children not to see that. Doesn't matter how old your kids become, by the way. Carol, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's get a word on the big stories of the day. Robert Taylor, the journalist and broadcaster, regular with us on the programme, is back with us. Afternoon to you, Robert.
Hello, Ian.
Let's start then with this. They are still debating. It's a private member's bill, of course, but it's very thorough. Busy scenes in the House of Commons, impassioned stories, personalised, anecdotal stories on both sides of this. And that's, of course, what makes this, for many MPs, rather tricky if you don't necessarily have that anecdotal, personalised component to the argument. You're listening to some very powerful arguments, and ultimately it will come down to that, regardless that this is meant to be a vote on the sort of the bill being correct. Naturally, you gravitate to the very polarised question, are you for or are you against?
Yeah, and it seems that since the last vote, which was a few months ago now, more MPs are getting more cautious about this and more inclined to vote against it, which means that it's going to be a closer vote. I think it probably will still just go through the sort of vibes that I'm getting, but it's certainly a lot closer because Labour MPs in particular are not convinced that the safeguards are there, and I don't blame them. I mean, we've seen awful government scandals in the past, from Windrush to Grenfell to contaminated blood, the post office scandal, of course. Do we absolutely trust the state to get this right? And that's the thing that I'm not sure about. I would certainly be voting against if I were in the Commons today.
And that's the point, isn't it? It's we all understand anecdotal stories, individuals that say, if I was in so much pain and I could just take this drink and put myself out of my misery, knowing that I've got literally, 3 or 4 weeks left, no chance of, put like that, we'd all take the potion. However, that isn't really the debate, is it? Because this is about what authority you give to the state.
Well, it is, and I thought Diane Abbott actually made a very powerful intervention today. That's a phrase I've never used.
Oh, hang on, Robert. No, sorry, we've booked the wrong guest, guys.
You've got the wrong
Robert's
guest.
gone mad. He's citing wisdom from Diane Abbott.
Not for the first time, gone a bit mad in my case, but she is against this, and what she said was that she wouldn't want to put, and I quote, her life in the hands of a panel. And we can add to that a government-sponsored panel who now, I understand, are not actually going to have to see the patient. They're just going to read about the patient.
Yeah.
Do you really want to have a government-sponsored panel to decide on life and death? No High Court judges, by the way, any longer. And we're never absolutely sure how the patient feels themselves about whether they feel they ought to do it for their family against their own wishes. That's always the problem with assisted dying.
Yeah, and it is literally that, isn't it? And the curious nature of this will never satisfy both sides, it seems, no matter how powerful the arguments seem to be. We'll watch with interest. Let's look at this story as well. Furious Brits stuck in Israel, very unhappy with the Foreign Office, who they say have been almost, non-existent and impotent in trying to evacuate them. And of course, they are trying to escape that onslaught of missiles coming from Iran. David Lammy apparently meeting with the Iranian foreign minister at some point. I'd love to be in that meeting. But nonetheless, if you are there and try to escape, this is a terrifying time.
Yeah, and what they're all saying, of course, is the Foreign Office, I'm told, has evacuated the families of embassy staff, but has not given a way out for ordinary Brits who are in Israel. And they must feel absolutely terrible, these ordinary Brits. I mean, they are literally, bombs are raining down on them. I'm not surprised they want to get out. They need some support. This is when the state is needed. This is where we really need David Lammy and the Foreign Office to, if you will, pull their finger out.
Yep.
And I understand the immense frustration and fear of people, Brits in Israel at the moment.
Yeah, spot on. It's not going to be easy. We're going to speak to one such person who's stuck there right now and doing their best to try and get out. And whatever happens with, Trump's decisions and the like, it appears that Iran, in the meantime, are perhaps even using, Trump's declaration that, I'll decide in a couple of weeks, as a kind of almost an open goal to continue, knowing that nothing's going to happen to them in that intervening time.
Yeah, well, you just never know with Trump. He plays on inconsistency. He plays on who knows what I'll do. I don't even know myself what I'll do. And it can cause, of course, immense issues. I mean, God willing, there'll be some sort of peaceful resolution here. I know a lot of people want to just see the Iranian regime completely knocked out, but that seems pretty far-fetched. We know from Iran, we know from Libya, you knock out one administration, you might get something far worse in its place. I'm not convinced by that one myself.
Yeah. Let's move to this story. Consultants, NHS consultants, this is, going on strike potentially. They're looking for a 35% pay rise. These are consultants' average age around about 145,000 a year. They're looking for this pay rise. The BMA wants a 14% pay hike this year alone, saying the government's 4% offer is a slap in the face. And we've seen this across different sectors of the NHS. But now we've got consultants who are already earning some good cash, and tempted to say those consultants probably do a little bit of extra work on the side as well in the private sector. But there it is. Do you pay 35% to someone earning 145,000 a year?
Completely ridiculous, unthinkable. Not even Labour's going to do that. They gave an above inflation pay rise, where almost the first thing they did when they came into power was say, you don't have to reform the NHS. Here's a whopping big pay rise. Well, of course, resident doctors or junior doctors, whatever we're meant to call them, are going to go on strike, and now consultants as well. It's unthinkable. I mean, I don't remember consultants when I was young ever dreaming of going on strike to get more money.
Yep.
But nowadays, everyone puts rights before responsibilities. And I'm afraid with all of us, if that's what you do, rights before responsibilities, then people are going to look in their own wallet, first of all, before patients.
Yeah, 100%. And just a very final story. One Labour MP, Vicky Foxcroft, probably not a household name to most, has resigned over plans to cut £5 billion from the benefits bill. Keir Starmer faces a bit of a backlash on this. I have to say, I mean, there were you congratulating Diane Abbott. I love a principled MP. And if they have a very passionate view on whatever side it is, to the point that they will resign over it, I can understand there's some ramifications with doing that for, you know, what it means in your local constituency. Fair play to Vicky Foxcroft. She hates what her own government are doing, and she's walked the plank.
Yeah, I think, as you say, you know, fair for her. She's done it. But, you know, I'd say to her, well, why did you elect Keir Starmer in the first place?
100%. Yep.
Do you think he pulled the wool over your eyes when he said in 2020, I'm going to be continuity Corbyn, I'm going to be governing from the far left, and then as soon as he gets into power, completely changes his mind? If you feel that Keir Starmer pulled the wool over your eyes, isn't time you start thinking about who the leader is and maybe get someone in a bit more principled? I think that's what I'd be saying to Vicky Foxcroft and others.
Yeah, well, there's over 100 very angry Labour MPs, which could be decisive. One saying the cuts would have made George Osborne blush. And I remember back in the day when the austerity, as it was called then, which was never a particularly useful phrase because it didn't in itself mean very much until you got into sort of the detail. Never affected everybody, but it did affect some people, of course. And at the time, I remember having a guest on who was absolutely, I thought they were going to pass out with anger. I remember him saying they might as well pull the legs off their wheelchairs for what they are doing. I mean, they really thought that this was... I'm not suggesting it's great if you have a benefit cut, and of course there are some horrendous cases where the wrong people might have got targeted. But what's happened here is something that sort of goes a step further than George Osborne, and that's the rather... I don't want to smirk at that, but you can't help yourself, given that these are some of the very people that said that George Osborne was the Antichrist, and here they are voting for the very same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I have some sympathy with Liz Kendall on this. Obviously, I'm in favour of reducing the size of the state. And when you consider that the number of people getting these personal independence payments is now 3.7 million people in the country, that's up from just over 2 million in 2019. So we've got almost more than 50% up in the last 5 years. Well, what's happening? Why are all these people needing personal independent payments? I don't get why that's happened. And I think it's right that Liz Kendall should be trying to crack down on it. Trouble is, from the Labour MPs side of it, that's not why they came into Parliament.
Indeed. Robert, have a cracking weekend. Thank you. Great to have you on as ever. Robert Taylor, journalist and broadcaster, with us on the programme. Thank you to him. More comment in from you. Joanna in Salisbury referenced the Palestinian activists. Do me a favour. Activists go and spray paint on military equipment in Russia, China, Iran, North Korea that do horrendous atrocities. No, they're cowards. They wouldn't dare. They would be locked up forever or put to death. I mean, absolutely right. If you walked onto an airfield in Russia and started monkeying around with their aeroplanes, you just get shot. I mean, it was simple as that. Similarly for China and also Iran as well. Here, you might get told off by the old bill. I'll give you a caution, young fella, my lad, with your terrible protesting ways. Ian, they will get away with the damage to the aircraft. This is a historic case law that will be used that allows damage to protect humanity. Look it up. Oh, man alive. There is a historic case law, damage to protect humanity. But then, would this be an example? There might be a historic law on it, but would this actually be an example of it? That would be the deciding factor in the court case, I guess. Richard says, Rick's in York, who says, or in Yorkshire, it says, in the mid-1970s, 4 of us set off from Yorkshire to cross the Sahara in an ancient Ford van. On the first evening, we pulled off the road somewhere between London and Dover and got into our sleeping bags inside the van, ready for a reasonable night's sleep and the trip to the ferry early the following morning. But about 3 a.m. we were woken up by hammering on the side of the van and about 12 armed military police screaming at us to put our hands in the air, get out the van and lay face down on the ground. Apparently in the dark, we'd parked near the entrance gate to a military base. It seems like they are not so strict these days. Wow. And if that was down in Dover, it would be down in Cheriton, I'd imagine, where that would have happened, just outside Folkestone, which would be on your way to Dover, where there's an army, I'm guessing there's an army base, or certainly was, I'm trying to think of the name of it now, down that neck of the woods. Yeah, that's exactly how they would have dealt with it. Now, you go in on an e-scooter and nothing happens. 0344 499 1000. As we speak, MPs are now beginning to vote. That'll take 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll bring you the result of that vote literally as we get it. So stand by for that. And, of course, we'll be speaking to somebody trying to get out of Israel right now, clearly proving to be a bit of a task with little or no help from the Foreign Office over here. Details on the way, coming up on 20 past 2. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 20 past 2. We will get to your calls shortly. But let's have a look at that story. What has been happening in Israel? A British national who fled Israel via the chaotic Jordan border has slammed the UK government, saying he feels disgusted and disgraced over the lack of support for citizens desperate to return home. 20-year-old Ethan Cohen had been living in Israel for work, decided to leave the war-ridden country after consulting with his family. We know, of course, what was happening over there in terms of the bombing from Iran. Alongside 5 other Brits, Ethan took a taxi to the border crossing in northeast Israel, hoping to escape the escalating violence. He joins us now. Ethan, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Yeah, good. Nice to have you with us. Well, I mean, I don't know whether congratulations is the right word, but you've got to a place where you feel a little safer. Would that be fair?
I'd say, I'd say that's pretty fair to say. I mean, I wouldn't personally, as a Jew, I'd say the safest place in the world for me right now is probably Israel. But with everything going on, I'd say that maybe here's probably slightly safer for sure.
Yeah, indeed. Well, indeed. You were trying to get out. There was no assistance. I mean, that seemed to be the problem, didn't it? That seems to be a bit of a theme here.
Absolutely none. I mean, there was, the queue at the border was a bit of a melting pot, like in terms of like, there was people from everywhere. There was Germans, there was French, there was Russians, Polish, and each of the different like nationalities seemed to have like a representative or someone from the embassy helping them or assisting them getting across the border. And it really seemed like us Brits are the only ones who didn't have any form of aid or support. We were very, very much there by ourselves.
Well, which is extraordinary. It's not as if there's not been a firm, long relationship between Israel and the UK. I'm not suggesting you can pick up the phone and speak to David Lammy, but, you'd think somebody at the embassy might be able to say, right, don't worry, this is the protocol, this is what we do, follow these instructions, and away we go.
Yeah, no, exactly. There was none of that. I mean, the aid at the border was, I won't even say minimal. It was more like absolutely nothing. I mean, also there was also a flight that they got us to sign up for, but we still haven't heard anything back about that. So we had to take matters into our own hands. And yeah, it's just been a bit.
Well, Downing Street say that apparently if you're in the country, you should register your presence with the Foreign Office. I mean, that's the first thing they say. Which is
exactly what we did.
You'd already done that,
Still haven't heard anything back from them.
I mean, you might think, bearing in mind you've got a mad regime firing missiles into Israel, that this would be a matter of, some reasonable importance.
Yeah, no, you would think that they'd be a bit more willing to get their British citizens out of there, but disappointingly, we didn't really have any help.
How many in your group, and roughly how many other sort of fellow Brits did you encounter trying to do the same in a fairly helpless manner?
So in our group, I'm one of 5, and then we ran into a couple more at the border. It seemed to be more like French and Americans. Yeah. I think that the other British civilians who are stuck in Israel are still awaiting help or assistance from the government, but they're not getting any. So, I think us 5 had like events back in the UK that we had to be back for within 3-4 days. So we're just like, what? Let's just do this ourselves. Let's just take matters into our own hands.
There it is. Listen, not quite race across the world, but I get it. Listen, I'm glad you're in a place where you sort of needed to be. Ethan Cohen, glad you're safe, though. That's the main thing. Thank you for being with us. He was stranded in Israel, loves Israel, but attempting essentially to try and get out of the place for obvious reasons. And there it is. I mean, no help from the embassy or the Foreign Office. I mean, that's an absolute disgrace. What the hell is going on over there, David Lammy? This is your department. Embassies that are around the world fall under an area that you have direct control over. You are the Foreign Secretary. Pull your finger out, mate. I know you're having tea and vol au vents with the Iranian Foreign Minister this afternoon, but have a thought for those Brits that are in a place where right now they might need a little bit of guidance from you and a little bit of safety. We are about to cross live to the House of Commons to get the result of that assisted dying bill. As we await the full results of that, let me just bring you some more comment on what's been happening here this afternoon from you on assisted dying. This from John in Gravesend, who says, if Labour MPs vote it down, they will be hypocrites if they voted for the abortion amendment. In one, you are taking away an individual choice to die. In the other, you are terminating life without consent of the individual. I mean, I have to say and agree, what happened with the abortion debate is a bit more complex than the abortion laws, as it were. As I understand it, stay pretty much the same. But this is if you have sought some other assistance or taken some sort of medication to abort your own child, even up to the point of, almost birth, then you will not be prosecuted. Now, what this does, it sort of, I heard somebody put it brilliantly, it infantilises women in the sense that it takes women away from criminal responsibility. There could never be a criminal element to that act because you're pregnant and it's your body. And that I don't think anybody with a straight face could ever say that falls under the reasonable banner of, you know, basic women's rights, the right to decide on what you do with your body. But I mean, we're talking about up to the point of a child could be born. Well, in fact, many weeks before then, of course, a child could be born. That's another part of the consent. But this is literally... There was a case recently where a woman was prosecuted because she had... she didn't realise she was that pregnant, apparently. Terminated her own child and was prosecuted. I think the charges were dropped. But that's kind of what threw this one up. But the result seems incredibly disturbing to me. And it just falls down the almost mesmeric line of it's a woman's body, therefore. And that is obviously applicable most of the time. The idea that there will be times when it's not applicable is abhorrent to these people. They can't work that out, really. But yeah, if you're 39 weeks pregnant, then that would probably not be a good thing. And the only reason that you took that action could be through some sort of, I don't know, some sort of feminine, female position of autonomy. And you are therefore not capable of, you know, some horrendous crime. I mean, it's awful. It's awful, and it's not a pleasant place to be. But this is, for many people, in a similar department, playing God. John's in Cornwall. We might have to cut in a second, John, just to get the result. But what are your thoughts on this? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
It dumbfounds me, some of the hypocrisy amongst some MPs. I mean, when you look at it, do they hate the working classes? Because for people with money, for many years they've been able to go to Switzerland or many other countries. If you've got money, you can take the way out. But the working classes are forced to suffer.
Just stay there 1 second, John. I'm going to come back to you. Here's the result.
The noes to the left, 291.
The ayes to the right, 314. The noes to the left, 291. The ayes have it, and look!
So there it is. That is the result, to allow adults who are terminally ill to be provided with assistance to end their own lives. 314 voting in favour, 291 against. John is still with us. John in Cornwall. As we were talking, the results come through. John, what do you make of that, firstly?
I am glad, because I think that gives working class people the same rights as people with money. I'm not saying that it's available to all. It's all available to all. And there was something I was going to say to you. If we had gone the other way to vote, I had an imaginary thing. I was going to say to you, Ian, imagine if next month 1,000 people help their loved ones depart this earth because of their suffering. There's not enough police, there's not enough courts, there's not enough anything to prosecute them. You know?
That's a very good point. But it's it's interesting that it's a majority of 23, whereas, you know, a couple of months back it looked as if this was going to be a majority of 123.
Well, yes, it is, because there's been a lot of scaremongering on there saying about what happens if this. And I thought that lady that was speaking earlier and saying about Switzerland have had it for 80 years, and that there hasn't been masses of cases. There's other countries in the world that have got it, assisted dying bill, and they haven't been bombarded with criminals or anything else. And I've always said, if you have the 3 doctors that concur that, you know, it would be peace and tranquility for you because there's no way back. And I've been in that situation with somebody very close, and I'll tell you what, the difference is when you have to watch the person you love more than life itself suffering, that is hell. That is hell. You know?
I get it, John. Thank you for that. It's understandable where this has gone. It's not yet completely law. This has got to go to the House of Lords. MPs have voted that the bill is in sufficient order to send it through to the upper house. They'll have a chat, and then the ping pong begins. It goes back. It might be a number of years before this becomes law itself. Thank you to John in Cornwall. We'll have more from you on that, as well as lots of comment coming through the Palestinian protests, people stuck in Israel, lots to get through. We're also going to talk about the mother of all data breaches in a moment. Passwords exposed. Change yours now is the advice. Details coming next from Sean Keach, who's head of technology and science over there at The Sun. We'll speak to him. And does it affect you? It might do. Stand by. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right back with you shortly with more comment, loads to get through this afternoon. Busy programme. And of course, covering and updating you on the assisted dying comment from that. That bill has just passed. 314 votes in favour, 291 against. That's a narrow majority of 23. As I said a second ago, I reckon a couple of months ago you're going to put a 1 in front of that majority, 123, possibly more. But there's been some reservations on this, but there it is. It is a majority. It passes. It now still needs to clear the House of Lords before it can become law, and there could be all sorts of other disruptions along the way. We'll keep you updated. 25 to 3 now. Cybersecurity experts have uncovered what they call the mother of all breaches, 16 billion records across 30 databases. I mean, wow is your first answer. The leaked data includes logins and passwords linked to Apple, Google, Facebook, Telegram and government accounts. Researchers believe most of it was stolen by cyber criminals using malware, though some may have come from ethical hackers who like to sort of give it a go, I suppose. Let's speak to Sean Keach, Head of Technology and Science over there at The Sun. Afternoon to you, Sean.
Hello, how's it going?
All good. Nice to have you with us. I mean, I said wow at the beginning. I mean, this really is the mother of all breaches, it seems.
It was like every day there's a new nightmare to worry about with technology. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. This is massive. This is about 16 billion records. Now, the understanding is that a lot of this is usernames and passwords. What they think happened is that this is sort of something called info stealer malware, which is basically a type of computer program that sits on your device. And as you're using it, it scoops up the info, maybe it's names, addresses, login details, and you don't know what's happening. Now, what's important to clarify here is that this doesn't seem to be a situation where Apple or Google, their servers have been breached. This is something that maybe you downloaded a dodgy app or you clicked a link that was sent to you over text or email, and then you end up with this info stealer on your device You don't know it's there, and it's harvesting this information. Then all of that gets chucked into a database, and then these databases get combined, and then you end up with something like this, which is an absolutely enormous database. And you've got to think this has a lot of value to cyber criminals, because if you're sitting at home in your sort of hacker lair and you've developed this fantastic scam or fantastic virus that you think is a great idea, this is the sort of database that you want to download, because it suddenly gives you this giant, or effectively address book to carry out your schemes. And so, you know, as a generic internet user, you might not have known that this has affected you, but you know, you're suddenly in the target for these hackers, which is obviously scary.
So these are those kind of emails that I get that tell me that my iCloud is out of memory. You've used too much of it. Some of them are very impressive. Some of them really look like they've come from Apple. Some of them are so woeful, they're almost laughable. I can't even believe it. I mean, these are very bad hackers. They can't even get logos right and font, you know, written in Comic Sans and things like that. Just curious stuff. But it's those kind of things. Many people would get them. It could be PayPal, could be HMRC. They look legit, so you might fill them in. They might not even be asking you for money. You've just got to check something, and lo and behold, your details have been nabbed, but you possibly don't even know about it.
You're absolutely right. And the problem is that after a big sort of leak like this, you're going to see a lot more of that stuff, because people are going to be carrying out these fake tech support scams. You know, these pop-ups that say your device is infected. We're going to be seeing loads of that, because crooks will be trying to capitalize on the sort of chaos around this. So even if you weren't affected in the leak, you can still be targeted by that sort of scam. Now, the problem with, you know, a leak like this is that you can't really stop it from happening necessarily, because even if you're very careful online, ultimately breaches happen and your data can still end up. I mean, even if you're not online, you know, your data can still end up online. And once it's there, you can't get it back. You can't knock on the door of a hacker and say, you know, please delete my data. Once it's sort of circulating on the dark web, it's out there for good. So all you can really do is try and sort of do a bit of damage mitigation. And I think really the main thing above anything else is two-factor authentication, which, you know, a lot of people will be familiar with. You try and log into a website, you get that little code sent to you via text message. You need to make sure that that is on every single account that you have, and most apps and services will offer it. And it's important because, say your password has been stolen in this leak, even if a hacker knows your password, they can't log into your account if they don't have that two-factor code. So super, super important to set that up. And also what I would personally recommend is you don't use the text codes, you use an app. There's a free app called Google Authenticator. There's a feature on your iPhone that generates these codes too, and they create codes, and they're a bit safer than the ones that come via text. So that's super important. And then also making sure that you have long, strong passwords that you're not reusing. I mean, the problem is that so many of us have so many accounts, it's impossible to remember really complicated passwords for everything. So use a password manager, make sure you're not reusing passwords, because this is another way that you could be affected by this breach. Even if your password isn't in this leak, it's not something that you've been personally sort of hacked for. If someone else is using the same password as you that has been caught up in the breach, then hackers can try that on your account. So you have to, it can come from all angles effectively. So, you know, if you're using long, strong, unique passwords, you've got this extra layer of protection on your accounts, then really you should be safe from any attacks. But you've always got to be on alert, especially in the coming days with, you know, these sort of tech support scams that might be targeting you.
Indeed. It's interesting. I'm quite evangelical about the password thing, much to the annoyance of my other half, who once in a while sends me a text saying, could you just send me the Netflix password? My Netflix password, the width of which wouldn't fit into this studio, to be honest with you, Sean. I go right for the full throttle on these things. I've got symbols and hieroglyphics are in there, you name it. But of course, we are now getting things like pass keys as well, aren't we? Which is a way to circumnavigate this very issue, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. But just on the password sharing point, if you have an iPhone, there is a feature in the Passwords app called password sharing, where you can add your wife or husband or child, and you can have a pool of shared passwords that are saved in the password manager. So you don't have to do that risky thing of texting your password to Netflix or the bank or the, you know, paying British Gas or whatever it is.
No, I get that. I get that. She doesn't get that. That's the problem.
Passkeys are meant to...
I love this domestic reveal we're doing here on the programme, but I'm sure lots of people over the course of the country have all of these moments with passwords. You know, some are very simple. They're written down, their dates of birth, addresses, all the obvious stuff that, you know, I thought we all learnt when we were 13 that you didn't do, but people still do. You know, some people still have 0000 as the way of getting their money out of their own bank account.
The problem is that there are so many accounts, and you know, some of them have very long and complicated login processes. You don't necessarily want to put in the effort. Passkeys are hopefully one of the ways that are going to resolve that, because it's supposed to spell the death of passwords, because as we've pointed out, passwords are extremely unsafe. And so passkeys are this replacement. It's this sort of digital key. And so when you log into a website, you're effectively just using the thing that you log into your phone with. So it'll be like a scan of your face or a fingerprint. So rather than sort of turning up at the door and saying a password out loud, it's just the bouncer. They know you, they know your face, and they let you in. And it's a much safer way of getting into an account than passwords, which can be stolen, leaked, breached. You know, as we've seen, a bit of a security nightmare, even if you've got a good one.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I know there's obviously lots of programs that these characters use that circumnavigate. Even my 5,000 character password could be found out by a determined character with the right software on their computer. Sean, just give us a word. We mentioned Apple, Google, Facebook, government accounts. Any response from these tech bigwigs to this current breach, even though it's not of their making?
They're all sort of staying away from it, which is fair enough, because ultimately it's not their fault. Generally, the advice from any of these places where their accounts credentials have sort of been exposed, but it's not their fault, is just to up your own account security. And my personal advice, actually, there's a brilliant website called haveibeenpwned.com, and that's spelled PWNED. And so what this website basically tracks all of these leaks, all of these breaches, compiles them, and then you just plug your email address into that website, and it will show you all of the leaks that you've been caught up in. So it'll say, oh, you were caught up in a LinkedIn breach in X year, or you were caught up in an eBay breach, and it will show you, oh, it was your address that was exposed or your phone number.
Wow.
And then every time there's a new breach, you'll get an email alert because your email has been detected in this breach. So it's a brilliant way, because then you get those alerts straight away, and then you can go and change your password, set up your security. So
great. Just
that's
remind
super.
Yeah, remind us again. What's the?
It's called haveibeenpwned.com, and it's set up by a cybersecurity researcher, and it's really a brilliant tool. If you're worried about hacks and leaks, and you should be, because everything is tied to the internet these days, that's a brilliant resource to use.
And pwned is spelt
PWNED. It sort of means hacked, sort of internet lingo.
Indeed, yeah. Like, us kids know that. I was just thinking about, some of the older ones out there. Listen, great to have you on, Sean. We will speak again. Real sound advice there from Sean Keach. He's Head of Technology and Science over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. It's 2:45. More comment from you. Back to assisted dying, and there's loads of comment on this one. Michael says, not happy about how these wicked death bills are being rushed through this week. Do not agree with both the full-term abortion and euthanasia bills. What kind of evil society are we becoming? All of this stuff really needs to be treated with a political equivalent of, kind of oven gloves and then some. This is, really tricky and controversial in the right sense of the word territory. Rob says, my mum was 79 and had always eaten properly and kept herself fit. She died 2 years ago after a 2-year battle with bulbar MND, multineurone disease, a vile disease that nobody deserves. I guess my point is I welcome today's decision, says Rob in Portsmouth. Rob, I'm sorry to hear about your mum. I know, there is a stage in our lives where we all say goodbye to our parents and the like, but it's how and when, of course, that are the big factors. And if such a bill is around, we do, as, Rob was just making that point, there are diseases out there, and if you've ever had experience of somebody dying of a disease that isn't particularly straightforward, once in a while someone just pops off in their sleep, age 90. Trebles all round. Congratulations, he led a great life and he died, as he wanted to while having a kip. Brilliant. But it's not always as calm and as tranquil as that. And the journey of losing somebody can be beyond horrific. We all know it. In that respect, you begin to see why this bill might be welcome. But I think we all also understand the counter arguments to it as well. On the issue of the data breach, Cliff says another data breach, and yet the government and many commercial organisations and banks try to push everything online. We must be mad. Yeah, it does feel like that sometimes, doesn't it? Because you think there, but for the grace of God. No, I've not been breached. I don't think so anyway. Watch with interest. But be as vigilant as you can. This is the new territory for mass industrial scale criminality. No doubt about that. 0344 499 1000. We'll be back with more from you. The Voice of Doom, day 7. Wow, we're on day 7, for goodness sake. Voice of Doom, day 7, on its way in a couple of moments, and we'll go back to the phones as well. 0344 499 1000. Your response on the assisted dying bill. It has just passed in the House of Commons, 314 votes in favour, 291 against. It's a narrow majority of only 23, but a majority it is. It now goes to the House of Lords before it becomes law. Lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back to your calls. This is Dave. Dave, don't go away. With you in 1 second. Dave's in London. We'll talk to him in a moment. 10 to 3. We've got the Voice of Doom, of course. Day 7 of the. This is for the uninitiated. It's a mystery voice of a political nature. You're looking for an MP, past or present. Who is this?
I can't guarantee that.
We reckon this one is darn hard. I'm not sure this is going to... Without further cluage, I can't imagine this thing's going to be won inside a year, frankly. So MP, past or present, who is this?
I can't guarantee that.
Don't phone in, but you can message if you fancy taking part, 87222. And the way it works, if we get a right answer, we'll have the news headlines at 3 o'clock, and then after that we will reveal all, but only if we get a right answer. If not, it rolls over to Monday, right here on the programme. Here's the voice one more time.
I can't guarantee that.
Let's hear it one more time.
I can't guarantee that.
All right, another time.
I can't guarantee that.
I can't guarantee that anyone's going to get it right. 87222 if you think you know. Details hopefully to come. Dave in London. Dave, thanks for hanging on. What have you got for us?
I think your mystery voice might be someone from a Carry On film, Ian. But,
so?
Wild guess.
Well, that could be any MP, frankly,
yeah.
couldn't it?
Yeah. I wanted to point out that we already have an assisted dying bill, which was passed by one person, Rachel Reeves, back in October, also known as the farmer's inheritance tax.
Yes,
so that has already assisted in the death of, I'm pretty sure, more than one farmer now, and it's going to assist in the death of many more, because people aren't talking about the fact that there are lots of people in their 70s and 80s that the clock is ticking for them.
Sure.
They're better off topping themselves before April 2027 than they are surviving, because the amount of inheritance they're going to pay on properties and now pensions is extortionate. So,
and will simply close their close their family business, of course.
Well, not just family businesses. It's also private individuals that have built a pension over time.
Yep.
That's not a defined benefit pension, right? So it's everybody in the public sector. Anyway, it's in the government's interest to kill us off, obviously, because one less person means one less pension. They'll get less health care to pay, and also they'll get their inheritance tax much earlier. And not only that, they'll also free up some housing as well. So from the politicians' point of view, I'm surprised the whole Labour bench didn't vote for it, but maybe no one pointed that out to them. Otherwise, it would have carried by a lot more than it already did.
Yeah. So you're disgusted by today? What's your view specifically on the vote?
I'm disgusted by both the abortion thing and this. We now have some death cult. I mentioned it to my wife the other day, who I thought might say something silly like "my body, my choice," which it wasn't my body, my choice when it came to a vaccine, but it seems to be for other reasons.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
But she said, isn't that murder? And I said, yeah, that's murder. So, we seem to be killing off the population we need at one end, the babies coming through, and then getting one of them we don't need at the other end. It's a death cult now. It's incredible.
It's a bizarre time, and I don't know whether the timing of these two events this week was just a slightly, if nothing else, interesting coincidence. Some would use another word, or whether it was. No, I don't think it wouldn't have been planned like that, but it certainly happened like that. Listen, Dave, thank you very much indeed for that. 7 minutes to 3. Georgina is down in London. Georgina, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, I want to talk about Stephen Fry, but firstly I want to say with this assisted dying bill, it's now turning into an episode of Logan's Run. Everyone's being bumped off by the sound of things. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the assisted dying bill.
Yes.
I thought Mr. Fry was a man of common sense. I've obviously been living under a misapprehension.
Georgina, just to interject, for those who didn't catch the story, this is Stephen Fry wading into, giving J.K. Rowling a bit of a hard time, saying that she's been radicalised by TERFs.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's Codswallop. Yeah, if I want to hear Stephen Fry, I'll watch an episode of Jeeves and Wooster. J.K. Rowling was absolutely talking common sense when she said we don't want men in frocks in our personal spaces, be it changing rooms or restrooms. It's both intimidating and in some cases can be dangerous for our women and girls, and we don't want it. I have no desire to hear any actor, sports personality or commentator force-feeding us with their political rhetoric. They are put where they are as a job of working for the entertainment of the British public. We don't want or need them to get delusions of grandeur, think they're politicians, and try and heal the world. If they want that, they can move to California. The same as you can only be an islander if you are born on an island. You can only be a woman if you are born with a vagina, ovaries, and a womb. Mr. Fry has no more knows the thought process or fears of a biological woman any more than a biological woman knows the thought process and fears of a homosexual man. I wouldn't dream of giving Mr. Fry advice on, let's say, how old his boyfriend should be, because this isn't my subject of expertise, and this is, more importantly, none of my business. And I would very much appreciate it if he would repay this compliment by keeping his nose out of women's matters. It's not needed, unwelcome, and totally out of his remit.
I love it. I love it. Georgina, you, as ever, speak common sense. Out of his remit. Thank you very much indeed for that. Obviously, you know, the bloke can have an opinion. It's just a very... You know, if somebody had said to me, guess what Stephen Fry's opinion is on this, I would have probably guessed that. I think he... and I've always, you know, I used to read his initial books, his autobiography, and some novels too, which I really, you know, enjoyed. I mean, properly enjoyed. And, I still think the guy has a... You know, I was slightly devastated to see him doing a bloody daytime quiz show quite recently. I know he'd say, oh, it's a box tick, isn't it? I don't need the money. I quite like the fun. And it's another thing I've done. I'd never done. I'm sure it's all of that. But nonetheless, yeah, he's entitled to his view. I don't think it's a particularly qualified one, but whose is? Matt's in Cheshire. What have you got for us, Matt? Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian. It's just generally about the bill that's just been passed.
Yeah.
And the speed of which that and the abortion bill have been passed.
Mm-hmm.
You will be... it's sort of obvious to think that Labour have got some kind of obsession with bumping people off.
Yeah.
They loved long lockdowns. They wanted us all in lockdown for a long time. And you really, when you add this to the fact that they're obsessed with protecting murderers and paedophiles and not deporting them and defending unknown strange men that pouring into Britain, if you add all these things up, we've got what we have is Canada. We've got Justin Trudeau in charge of our country.
Do you know what? I mean, you're not even just being, you know, mischievous saying that, because that's true, right? I mean, yes, that's exactly the kind of leader we have. Only capable of groupthink, no real idea of autonomous intellectual thought when it comes to politics, no real sort of inner core of ideology that drives him, just a general basic flimsy idea of how life should be. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the only one, obviously. They were huge during that period. We've mentioned them endlessly over the years.
Yeah.
Ardern, Sturgeon. I think Starmer is the last remaining woke lunatic. And because he's so out of touch with everything, he doesn't even notice that woke is dying now. So he can't even move away from that. He still thinks it's current.
It's a kind of a disease, isn't it, almost, in some respects? And, you know, I know I've got mates who kind of, you know, subscribe to all of this kind of hullabaloo, and they genuinely don't think there's, you know, anything. They think they're decent, good people. I think that probably underpins maybe some of their reasoning. Listen, I've got to move, Matt. Always good to talk. Thank you for that. Barry says, reference to RAF Brize Norton, I believe the RAF police remain responsible for airfield security. As an RAF veteran, I would assume complacency set in and security was lax, to say the least. I feel sorry for whoever is the officer commanding the security squadron. Their career will be effectively ruined. There has to be a scapegoat and someone will pay the price. It definitely won't be the station commander, says Barry. Thank you for that. Stand by. Big hour coming up. We've got the crime section as well. Unbelievable story. And the voice of doom. Who is this?
I can't guarantee that.
Hopefully, if we got a right answer, I'll tell you after the news at 3 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And as you've been hearing in breaking news in this hour, assisted dying in England and Wales has moved a step closer after MPs backed the bill. It was close by 314 votes to 291. Now it heads to the House of Lords. We'll have more response from you on that one. Also, pro-Palestinian protesters have claimed responsibility for breaking into, I kid you not, breaking into RAF Brize Norton on an e-scooter and damaging 2 military planes. This is a shocking breach of security. Nobody's saying very much at the moment. Will heads roll? You'd think so. And what will happen to the protesters? And in this week's Talk Crime, we explore Northumbria Police's longest-running missing persons case. It's a decades-old mystery. And we hear from Anne Law's daughter, who's still searching for answers as to what happened to her mum back from the early 1970s. Fascinating stuff. We'll have more on that a little later as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Before we go any further, let's do the voice of doom. So, this was the voice that we played you at around about 10 to 3.
I can't guarantee that.
Who is that? The only thing we told you is that it's an MP, either past or present. I should have said, and I've been saying it for a couple of days, it's not Michael Howard. So anyone who guessed, however, lots of you guessed Michael, so it's not Michael Howard. It's not Tony Benn, Kenneth Clark, Cecil Parkinson, no. Geoffrey Finsberg, not familiar with him, but it's not him. John Gummer, no. Rory Stewart, no. But Zach Goldsmith, no. In fact, yeah, you've guessed, you're ahead of me here. We haven't got a right answer. It returns on Monday for day 8 of the Mystery Voice. Let me give you a reminder so you can record it if you want. Here it is again.
I can't guarantee that.
I think this could run for like a year and nobody would get it, but we'll give it. We'll add in clues as we go, as we always do. It's back on Monday here on Talk. Now, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has condemned the damage to 2 military Voyager jets at RAF Brize Norton, calling the incident a disgraceful act of vandalism. I think it's a little more than that, Prime Minister. Footage shows 2 protesters from Palestine Action speeding across the tarmac on e-scooters and spraying red paint into the engines. I mean, I would take a guess, without knowing how much it costs to repair things, that would be significant. The group says it targeted the base over its alleged role in supporting British military operations linked to Gaza. The Reform MP Sarah Pochin has been speaking on this to Talk. She was with Alex a little earlier and shared a similar sentiment to the Prime Minister.
You know what I'd do with them? I'd send them back to where they've come from, British citizens or not. I'd strip them of their British citizenship because this is treason, and I'd send them back to wherever they've come from. But the point is, this is not, as you say, like we get on a daily basis outside Parliament, just, you know, your professional protesters. These are hardcore criminals that are committing treason and need to be treated very, very severely.
Yeah, I was being ironic, by the way, when I said a similar sentiment to the Prime Minister. It couldn't have been more different. Of course, the PM saying a disgraceful act of vandalism. Let's speak with Dr. Chris Parry, former NATO and Royal Navy commander. Not a Royal Mail commander, Chris. I mean, I'm sure that's a very good job to have, but not on your CV. But glad you've inputted lots of work in the military over the years. And of course, when you see a story such as this, I think we can all agree, whether you are somebody with a military background or not, this is huge, right? Breaking into an RAF base and vandalising planes that could have been almost ready for a mission is right up there in terms of criminality.
Yeah, Ian, I should say that as helicopter aircrew, I've spent my time delivering a lot of the mail around the fleet.
So you have done a bit of it.
I've done a bit of it, yeah. Yeah, let's be honest here. Let's call it what it is. It's sabotage. These are frontline aircraft. They've just been incapacitated by the paint going in the engines. And you're absolutely right. It's going to cost a fortune in terms of maintenance hours to check those aircraft over, make sure the engines are okay. You know, heaven help us if one of those engines flames out when the aircraft's in the air next time because something's happened inside. You know, we're talking about people now who've got no responsibility for their country, for the people who have to fly those aircraft. As Sarah Pochin said earlier on, they're criminals. And, you know, the current going rate for hurty words is 3.5 years. I'm hoping to see these people get at least 3.5 years inside for this. And if they aren't British nationals, immediate deportation. You know, we have a government that says we're on a war footing at the moment in relation to Russia, China, and Iran. It says we've got Iranian sleeper cells in our country. And yet one of our major, in fact, our major RAF base is wide open to these jokers. And I'm afraid to say that saying, you know, we don't really like this act of vandalism is pathetic.
It's absolutely unbelievable. As many people have pointed out, if you tried this in China or Russia, you'd just be shot dead if you were seen on an airfield and shouldn't be there. I think we can all know.
Ian, during the Cold War, you'd have been shot dead.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Heads are going to roll on this, surely, Chris. I mean, you know, I don't want to dob anybody in it, but there will surely be somebody who will be responsible for security. And one has to assume, unless this is the new terrain for how you guard an RAF base, or don't, as the case may be, then you'd assume someone's going to get a phone call from their senior officer.
Yeah, I think there has to be an inquiry and find out where, you know, the blame, and let's face it, there is going to have to be blame attached here, lies. You know, you have to have a balance of authority and delegation in things, and we've got to find out what arrangements are in place. But Ian, I've got to tell you, every single base in the country is wide open. You and I can probably buy a drone on Amazon tomorrow, and on Sunday we can probably land it on one of those planes.
Extraordinary.
You know, we are in a situation where we don't take it seriously. Our politicians talk the talk; they don't actually back it up. You know, typically, you know, we talk about percentages of GDP and things like that. It's irrelevant. You know, we can spend all the money we like if we don't have the capabilities to defend ourselves and to actually put our words into action. You know, we are basically funding our defence at the moment on rhetoric, or not on hard capabilities. And I'm afraid this is a cultural attitude that somehow, you know, the missiles that are hitting Kharkiv and Kiev can't hit Kent, for example. You know, we're in the front line. And, you know, if these two jokers can get in, as I said, they've actually done us a favour, because they've highlighted the problem we've got practically everywhere. I'm in Portsmouth at the moment, Ian. I don't think you could get somebody into the naval base here, frankly. So I think, you know, we need to get, you know, onto people, whether it's the Ministry of Defence Guard Service or the RAF Police. They need sorting out. They need to say, look, this is what we need to do on a, you know, Friday morning when everybody else is asleep. We've got to look after our fellow servicemen and our country.
What's interesting about this, I mean, it would be laughable if it was in any other setting. You know, if this was a case of some camouflaged people who dug a big hole under a fence and all the rest of it, you could see what they were trying to do and why they felt the need to do that. They went in on a flipping e-scooter, for goodness sake, Chris. I mean, this was... there was no hiding this. It's almost carry-on stuff.
Yeah, it's a big base, but on the other hand, you know, imagine it happening at Heathrow. Do you think it could happen at Heathrow? I don't think so. So, you know, I'm sure there will be the usual litany of excuses about under-resourcing and all this sort of thing. At the end of the day, we're concentrating on things that are not important at the expense of those that are, frankly.
Chris, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Enjoy Portsmouth. He's off his way down there. Dr. Chris Parry, former NATO and Royal Navy commander, equally as flummoxed as the rest of us. And as he said there, you know, if you get 3.5 years for hurty words on social media, you might think somebody breaking into an RAF base and vandalising military equipment, certainly to the tune of, well, goodness knows what it cost to wash out the jet engine that's had red paint sprayed into it. I'd imagine, you know, but it's going to cost you more than a fiver to do that. There would be huge ramifications. This one from Carl, who says, Derbyshire does. Unfortunately, they've done a U-turn on several of the safety measures. This is my biggest concern. No cold weather payment, very ill, so I take my life, for example, and other similar reasons, not just health related. And this one from Neil. We should charge those Palestinian protester nutters for the damage to those plane engines. From what I've read, the repair will not be cheap. So let's hit them in the pocket. Do you know, that's something I've never quite understood. I remember watching one of those, you know, road wars or cop programmes, whatever it happened to be. And they got on CCTV a fella that went round a high street with a massive hat, like a sledgehammer. And this nutter just whacked it on every shop window he could. So Boots got done, Smiths got done, H&M got done, you know, every single, the Body Shop. Lord knows how many thousands of pounds of damage that is. Between, I mean, these are big, huge, you know, 20-foot windows by 40-foot wide, as big as it gets. And at the end of it, they, you know, he got arrested. They showed on the CCTV the police car arriving. They stuck the guy in handcuffs, went to the station, and, you know, Bad Barry wasn't laughing anymore as he was done for criminal damage and fined £250. And I'm thinking, what about the cost of the windows? Do you not have to pay for the windows? He's been fined, which he probably hasn't got enough money to pay for the fine. Do you not just automatically have to pay for the windows? You never hear that. You know, somebody smashes into a police car. They're done for criminal damage, maybe assault on police, possibly. But why do they not have to pay for the police car? I don't get that. And these guys are probably not going to have to pay for 2 massive engines on a military plane with capability to be used in warfare. You might think that will be a few quid. Let's go to South Wales. Leighton is with us. Leighton, how are you doing?
Hello, not too bad, Ian. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. On the RAF story, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so back in 2003, you'll remember post 9/11, Gulf War II started.
Yeah.
I was a serving police officer at the time. I was on something called the Police Support Unit.
Okay.
So you know when you saw the London riots and the guys with flameproof overalls, full-length shields and helmets with visors and whatnot, dealing with the public disorder or football matches, football fans going berserk. I was in one of those units, which is about 27 guys, inspector, 3 sergeants and 28 guys, inspector, 4 PCs. And we were deployed on what they call mutual aid to RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire.
Yep.
There were numerous PSUs there from all over, from North Wales, from the Met, from sort of Merseyside, to take care of the anti-war protesters, because RAF Fairford had been taken over by the US Air Force, the US military, as a base to fly their long-range bombers out there to bomb the regime in Iraq, Saddam Hussein's regime. And we were there to patrol the perimeter and prevent the anti-war protesters from scaling the fence and getting onto the base. Now, obviously, because they were flying out of there, it was ceded as American territory in exactly the same way as an embassy is the territory of the country that it represents, rather than where it is located.
Yep.
So it's American territory. And our purpose being there was made unequivocally clear to us. There was one reason for us to be there, was to stop them scaling the fence, not to stop them causing any damage to the equipment, the planes that were flying out to drop the bombs. It was so they didn't get shot dead.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That was it.
Because that would have been the upshot back then, yeah?
That would have been the upshot, and not one damn would have been given on that base if...
And I would imagine possibly, Leighton, at RAF, American air bases, and there are many in this country, as you know, I would imagine that's probably still the case, that you'd be shot on the spot.
Absolutely, and not only would no damn be given, but whoever pulled the trigger and sent the round down range would probably be invited for tea and coffee with the commanding officer.
That's right, given a promotion.
A big pat on the back for doing so.
So when you see this story, that a couple of chancellors didn't climb a fence, they didn't have to dig a hole, they just rode into the RAF base on an e-scooter. It's if it wasn't so serious, this would be laughable.
It absolutely beggars belief, and you may be aware, Ian, that there's a lot of there's a massive camaraderie across all of the forces, the Army, the Navy, the RAF. You know, we will rip the Michael out of each other mercilessly. But God help anyone who's not served in the military or tries doing the same thing. But we will rip each other apart. We have long torn.
And Leighton, we just lost your line there. I'm sure you can probably still hear me, but it's just gone. Listen, but a great call. You got everything into that, and thank you. Former cop who knows all about guarding RAF bases. Thank you to him. This in from Stuart. Starmer said we're on a war footing, so the pro-Palestinian protesters who sabotage military equipment should be shot. That's normal when acting undercover to denigrate a country's military capacity. On the same point, David in the Cotswolds, the Brize Norton attack. If the IRA had done this, it would have been an act of terrorism. If some weirdos claiming to be protesters, then apparently it's just vandalism. I can't believe Keir Starmer just called this a bit of vandalism. I mean, is the man totally mad? Goodness me. 0344 499 1000. More coming from you next on Talk.
The support from the British government, got nothing. I've registered on everything I'm meant to. I haven't had anything at all. No guidance. All right, the only guidance we have been given is obviously to make our way to the Jordan or Egyptian border. I'm a 16-year-old woman here on my own. How am I going to do that? I've got an 8-month pregnant daughter, you know, young children. She's not going to get me there. I just feel that we are about the only country in the world that government have just left us here in what's known as the war zone.
You can't help it, right? Because I'm looking at that image, and through my mind, I'm playing the kind of Benny Hill theme.
But yeah, I know.
Because I know that the ridiculous cops are just out of the picture, and it's hilarious, you know.
Yeah, well, so what happened? This is the scene with our crutch guy. That this is unfolded yesterday morning. He'd apparently previously tried to get on a boat the day before, but you know his disability got the best of him, and he just couldn't quite make it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So let's go back to some calls and comment from you. We'll start off with Steve in Blackpool on that curious RAF breach of security. Steve, afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. I used to work at Brize Norton.
Did you?
So I know it well.
Yeah, right. So what do you make of this then? Is that an easy place to ride an e-scooter into?
No, not at all, because you have an approach road,
Yep.
which means like a side road that goes to the gates, which is at least 200-300 yards long.
Got it.
So they can see you coming, which is cameraed, and it's got a barrier going one way, barrier going the other. I'm going back a few years since I've been there, so they've had to up the barrier to go in. So I think this has been pre-planned, because when you drive onto Brize Norton, it's like a little village to begin with. It's got roads and buildings going off everywhere. The airfield is at the back. You've got to drive down little roads and side roads and so on and so forth to get to the airfield. I think, and I can't be proved, I could be proved right, I could be proved wrong, they've planned exactly where they need to go, or they've just chanced it chanced their arm, gone in, drove down roads, found 2 aircraft and thought these ones will do, because the big loadmasters have their own parking bays, if you can imagine.
Yep.
That's where they're based. And they're in the far left side, or they used to be on the far left side. And because they're so big, they have their own parking bays. If that makes any sense.
Of course it does, yeah.
But to get, you can imagine that Brize Norton is like an airport. It even has a departure lounge where obviously deploying soldiers go to fly out. So it's like an airport.
Yep.
In a very similar way, except it's soldiers, not civilians. So I'm not sure how they've driven in on a scooter without, unless
I mean,
and they've slipped through the barrier and carried on.
Is it almost like a 1,000,000 to 1 chance that whoever was, meant to be keeping their eye on the barrier just happened to turn around and pour a cup of tea at that exact moment?
Exactly, but there's more than one person on the gate.
Well, you'd hope so.
During the day, there's at least 4 or 5 people on the gate, and there should be an armed guard on that gate as well. Where is that armed guard? Because they're on a 24-hour watch, especially for a frontline base, so to speak, as Brize Norton is, because they have aircraft coming in, going up to Akrotiri, so on and so forth. There's kit going out all the time to Akrotiri.
I mean, it's surprising. This is surprising for somebody who doesn't know Brize Norton, like an outsider, but you know it, so you can literally picture where the point of where somebody would have got in and how it should be pretty much impossible.
Yeah, pretty much, because they'll have had to pass at least 15 or 20 different buildings that have different departments in it, and people will have been coming in and out of that building. How have they not seen them? And there's cameras everywhere.
Right, yeah.
There really, and there was cameras everywhere when I worked there, and this is going back to 2015, so 10 years on, there's going to be more security. I can guarantee today they are having a right flap on at Brize Norton. Yeah. I guarantee it.
Well, yes, and, will heads roll? Who knows? I'd imagine one would somewhere. Steve, thank you very much indeed, but I bet there's a lot of finger-pointing going on as well. Just Me says, I love how you are joking regarding the Brize Norton breach, as though it was just a sort of Just Stop Oil spraying a building. I don't think in any way that defines, considering I've called for assassination, basically, I don't think that really defines how we've been talking about it. What if they infiltrated a nuclear plant or attached some sort of IED to an aircraft full of fuel? Once our military is breached, we have no hope. I 100% agree. It's been precisely my point. This is David down in London. David, what have you got for us?
Hi, Ian. I didn't hear you talk about assassination.
No, I was jesting to make the point that I don't think we've made light of it.
What can we do if we don't laugh? What else is there to do? Look, Ian, why don't these cowards go and attack somewhere like Lakenheath, the US base, or somewhere like that? I'll tell you why. Because they'd be dead.
Well, you'd
They'd
think,
be shot down, and that's quite right, as they should be shot down. We're in very difficult circumstances at the moment. I suppose if they got shot down, all the leftists would say, how terrible, what a terrible thing.
Of course they would. But here's the thing, David. I mean, it's not like, if they were just going over a fence and they were caught, the old spotlight went on and, a couple of squaddies turned up armed. Right, get down, move, get on the ground. You could... But when you're sailing along a runway on an e-scooter towards a military plane, you might well assume that would be terrain where somebody could kill you.
Ian, it reminds me of the Monty Python sketch, I'll scratch your eyes out. Do you remember that one?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, well, that was the whole point of the kind of, if it wasn't so serious, this would just be some kind of farce, right?
Look, these guys should be arrested if they can catch them. They should be arrested and they should be prosecuted for all the damage they've cost. Take their houses away or whatever they've got. Unfortunately, Ian, they're almost certainly on benefits.
Yeah, they won't have a house. There's no doubt about it. There's no, they might have a boat. I don't know. David, great point. Thank you very much indeed for that. This one from Phil. A group has claimed responsibility for the RAF basing encroachment, so surely shouldn't the group be charged with planning acts of terrorism? Well, yeah, you'd think so, but of course they will say we weren't planning acts of terrorism. It was a protest, not a terrorist activity, because all we did was daub paint. Well, firstly, let's look at that. You sprayed paint into the engines of a military aircraft, which is clearly going to cost thousands, if not tens of thousands, to clean out. That thing's got to fly at some point, and I'd imagine having paint sprayed into it compromises its safety, if nothing else. And it's probably bright red now, as distinct from the grey it should be. So you've got that. So even if they got away with not planning terrorism, I mean, surely from our perspective, if you'd seen two people on an e-scooter and they can pelt along, we've seen the footage of it, going in that direction, you might think, yeah, I mean, they're heading towards a military aircraft on an e-scooter. Your assumption would be, what, they're going to blow it up? What are they going to do? Start firing something? You don't know at this point. It would be of no surprise and should be of no consequences if somebody on an airbase had shot them. I mean, that would be what you would imagine the story would be today. Oh, have you heard about the story? 2 protesters got shot. They broke into an RAF base and started heading fast on e-scooters towards a military plane. That wouldn't surprise anyone. You'd say, well, yeah, that's kind of what would happen if you did that, right? Norman's in Dartford. Norman, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, I think this goes way beyond criminal damage.
Yeah.
This could be classed as terrorism.
Well, they would argue it's not terrorism because they didn't do anything terror-related. I am assuming that would be their defence,
What you're saying is, what anybody's saying then, you can go in and damage RAF aircraft, which are probably in use for this country.
Yeah.
But, oh, well, as long as you didn't do anything, kill anyone, that's all right. It's ridiculous.
It's utterly ridiculous. I don't know what's likely to happen to these two people. Say again, Norman, sorry?
If you talk about fines, we're bordering on stupidity here.
Yeah.
Absolutely stupidity. The people going to damage an aircraft that is in use in this country for the RAF, and we're talking about criminal damage.
Yeah.
We've gone bloody daft in this country.
I mean, this is...
This will be a good test of the police, the judicial system in this country, and this rubbish government to see what they are prepared to do with these people who've done this. I find this absolutely serious. If we don't stop this, there's no end to this. No end at all. I
didn't even realise until just this second that the Prime Minister's, the plane the Prime Minister of Espina aircraft flies on is also based at Brize Norton. So you can add that into the, which heightens the point you're making, I think, Norman. Thank you very much indeed for that. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch said the security breach was deeply concerning. This is not lawful protest, it's politically motivated criminality. She said we must stop tolerating terrorist or extremist groups that seek to undermine our society. Local Lib Dem MP Charlie Mayland described the activist actions as stupid and dangerous. He said the investigation should establish how this happened and what can be done to make sure that no further breaches occur. And at the moment, as far as I understand it, nobody's been arrested for this so far. And the video footage of this attack was taken by the people that mounted this attack on the airbase, spraying red paint into the plane's engines, which will cost more than a few quid to put right. Stay with us, lots to come. In a moment, we're going to talk about the story of Anne Law. Now, Anne Law disappeared very mysteriously back in 1973 and has never been found. There's various twists and turns in this clearly, demonstrably sad and disturbing story. Anne's daughter was 5 at the time, 5 years old, when her mum just vanished. But what happened? There is a link to the husband, Joanne's father, and there have been attempts to find Anne Law, but with no success. There is a new podcast series about exactly this, and Joanne Mackle, who is Anne's daughter, will join us to explain more about this extraordinary, disturbing story. You don't want to be missing this in just a couple of moments, right here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 3:30. Now, each week, in association with CrimeCon, the world's #1 true crime event, we delve into the minds of criminals, those who chase them, and all manner of other unsolved stories around it, from psychology of offenders to forensic breakthroughs, the fight against wrongful convictions, and gripping insights from some of the biggest names in true crime. Now, this week, we're going to focus on Joanne Mackle, whose mother, Anne Law, vanished without a trace back in 1973. Joanne was just 5 years old. This remains Northumbria Police's longest-running missing persons case. Decades of silence, police failings, and a family's relentless fight for answers are uncovered in the new podcast. Joanne is a former police officer as well, and here to share more of this story, which involves so much more as well. Joanne, welcome to the programme. Nice to have you with us.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. I mean, I wasn't aware of this story. I didn't know much about it at all. I'm sure it's like lots of missing people stories, that there are peaks of interest, and every now and again a journalist phones and says, oh, we've heard about this, we'd like to get a word on. This has gone on since 1973. So just talk us through, if you can. You were a 5-year-old at this time. I mean, it's clearly a disturbing story, and continues to be so. But talk us through, if you can, what happened and how you first found out that your mum had gone missing.
Well, firstly, just to pick up on your point there about the journalists looking for it, a few journalists did ask me for this details of this story, but it was the other way around. I approached the Centre for Women's Justice and the iconic Julie Bindel, because she spent her entire life dealing with women's injustice.
Yeah.
Out of rage for something else. So it was the lovely Julie Bindel. It's her platform, it's her podcast, really. It's my story.
Yeah.
And the Samantha Smith produced this for me to raise awareness of a few different things. And anyone who works in the world of domestic violence, coercive control, things like that, missing from home, police, CPS, crime courts, that's what it's there for.
Yeah.
But the story itself actually is starts back in a time when my dad and his first love, called Eric, were young men in a time in the world in, late 60s, 50s, where to be homosexual was a criminal offence. And society vilified those people for being who they were.
Yeah.
So my mum's story begins when my dad, Gilbert, and his partner, Eric, who were about 9 to 10 years older than these two twin girls, met them when they were 15. My mum was an identical twin. Her name was Anne, and her sister was called Margaret. These were very naive 1950s girls, virgins, brought up, very loved. And they decided that they would marry these, cut a very long story short, they would marry these girls, and that would act as a foil for their relationship. The relationship between the men eventually broke down, and I think on both counts, the men kind of embraced the family life because it hid who they were. Yeah. But when you're masking who you are constantly, it's going to make everything else break down in you.
Yeah.
My dad became very, very ill. He was a schizophrenic. He's very violent towards my mum and me. Tried to kill us on a few occasions. He beat her up quite a lot. It's almost cliche. The police came to the house a few times.
Yeah.
Did absolutely nothing. Listened to all of the prejudice and the narratives that my dad were telling the police. Anyway, my mum disappeared completely it was on our wedding anniversary. She got married on the same day as just 2 days after her birthday because my granddad wouldn't allow her to get married. He obviously had an instinct for this man, this relationship between these two men. Anyway, I'm rambling, sorry.
Not
My
at
mum
all.
disappeared. She's never, ever been found since. She's literally disappeared off the face of the earth. The picture you've got up there is actually of my mum's twin sister. That one there is of my mum when she was 17. Anyway, so my dad put us into care, me and my brother. My brother was Trevor, who was 5 years older than me. He was 9 and I was 5. We were on our way to an orphanage, and for some reason this woman stepped in, and we went into this insidious household where the husband was a paedophile and so was the son. So we had a horrible childhood. We both left as soon as we could. But 10 years later, my brother was taken by my dad when he was about 18 or 19 and his cousin Stephen to the banks of the River Tyne up in a place called Bywell in Stocksfield, given a shovel in the middle of the night. He had 2 shovels. My brother didn't know whether he was going to have his head chopped off or whether what he was doing there. But my brother was very, very keen to try and find my mum's body, and he spent his entire life looking for her, as have all.
So did you say your brother went with your father?
Yes, and his cousin.
Right.
To the banks of the River Tyne, and the title of the podcast is called "Dig Up Your Mum," because that's exactly what he was told. Dig up your mum. There's a shovel. That's where I've put her.
Wow.
I've put her head towards the river. She's in a fetal position. I've covered her with this and a bit of stand. I think she's here. And actually, when he got there, there was already the ground had already been disturbed. So I think my father had already been there and tried to dig her up. Anyway, eventually, I mean, these 2 lads walked into the police station. The police didn't believe them initially until the bell was raised, and obviously then my dad was arrested. He admitted to killing my mum, and he was eventually put on trial. The trials collapsed twice. Once because of the mental health of my dad, and the second time the judge dismissed the case because the police still hadn't found the body. So the police had gone and done a dig where my dad hadn't found the body. And actually to this day, nobody's ever been found.
Wow.
My dad was then released from the court, and the judge kind of told the police off, said, come back when you've got some proper evidence. All you have is a confession of a man who's very mentally unwell. So it can stand for nothing. And the way they got that confession, they put my brother into the cell with my dad to try and get that confession out of him, to prompt him. And so they had nothing. The police did a terrible job of investigating, both in 1973 and then back in 1982. So what I did, once I'd got out of the abusive care system I was in and had the reins of my own life, was I joined the police. I became a detective and then a detective sergeant. And I worked, amongst other things, on murders, rapes, offences against women, a bit of counter-terrorism. I've just been listening to your programme a little bit there. And
you should have been at Brize Norton back in the day, really.
I know what I would do with them for doing that.
Indeed.
But you know what? So I became the detective that I needed and the detective that I wanted.
Yeah.
I also became the mum that I needed and the mum that I wanted.
Good for you.
And I was screaming at the outrageous continuing mistakes of the judicial system in this country over another murder, which was the murder of Sharon Henderson's daughter, Nikki Allen, which happened when I was a serving cop, but I didn't have anything to do with it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And how the police, the same police officer who investigated that 10 years after my mum's murder, made the same mistakes. So he cocked up my mum's murder, he cocked up a few in between, and then made a horrific cock-up of the Nikki Allen murder. But this man was promoted to chief superintendent because, what, was he in the right golf club? Possibly in the same lodge, but he was absolutely crap at his job. So I went and became a detective and thought, right, I'm going to do it much better, and I'm going to treat people much better than I've been treated. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell.
Well,
that's it slimmed down slightly.
Oh my goodness! I can only imagine how many other, peaks, troughs, avenues, and tentacles this story has.
Twists and turns.
I mean, there's some obvious.
It's real life.
Yeah, and it's real life. I mean, some obvious stuff here. I mean, the fact that you were 5. I've got a little 6-year-old boy, and if anything happened to, obviously he'd miss his dad because I'm a cool dad. But if he, if his mum wasn't around, I don't imagine he could ever recover from that because he's so close. And at 5, it's not like you forget who your mum is. You will have memories still. I have no idea how horrifying and terrifying that initial day when you realised your mum's gone.
Well, even worse for my brother because he actually went down when it was happening and saw her dead body. We assume now lying there.
So he didn't know it was a dead body at the time. He just saw your mum.
We used to walk into the room to interrupt the domestic violence if we could. My mum used to often hold me as a baby and sleep with me every night in the same bed as a human shield. And obviously, she divorced my dad. She was about 6 days away from absolute. So that's a critical time in any woman's partnership. The worst time at all is when you're leaving a domestically violent partner. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. It's best to read it.
What about your own relationship, Joanne, with your dad? I mean, were you ever able to look him in the eye and say,
Oh, absolutely.
Where is
life.
What happened?
Well, my dad died in 2005. And the sad thing was he was around since the judge let him go in the court in 84. To 2005, the police never went back. The police never ever said, as Anne turned up, can we get your medical records? Can we look at, he tried to kill his second wife. He had another wife. Wow. And it was all hidden. They did nothing. They didn't go back and ever look at his medical records, and you'd find a lot of information in that. Yeah. But they put my mum's investigation into a box and forgot about it.
What is...
So, sorry, I didn't answer your question there. Your question was, did I ever ask him? Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And I was actually asked by the police on his dying bed, will you wear a wire in case he makes a deathbed confession? I told them to get lost, Yeah.
Why did you not want to get that confession?
I did want to get the confession. But I thought the police had failed in their job and they were using me because I was a police officer. It was an easy strike for them. Why didn't they go in and wear a wire and speak to him? They had loads of time before that. I was just annoyed with them.
And never went down that avenue, which is extraordinary. Yeah. And you were there when he died. You were next to him.
I wasn't there. I wasn't in the room when he died, but I was there during the time he was dying. He died of lung cancer in 2005.
And what was your relationship with him at that point?
Well, I hadn't spoken to him for about 6 years prior to that because I was raising young children like yourself. Yeah. And my dad hunted me all my life and he was really hard to manage. And at times I just had to make sure that I was hidden from him. I moved house a few times and when I had children, I had a full-time job, full-time career and 2 children, and I just couldn't take his mental health on anymore. But before that, I spoke to him a lot. He loved me and he sought me out wherever I was all the time. And really, I can only describe it as it's like being hunted by him. I didn't want him in my life, but I didn't have much choice.
What's your opinion of your dad? I mean, given that you told us about he was hiding the fact that he was gay, he hid that and clearly had schizophrenic mental health issues. Is this a man you hate? Is this a man you feel sorry for, despite what has happened?
This is a man I feel quite detached from because don't forget, when I was very young, he was in the Merchant Navy. He was constantly at sea and he was away. So I didn't really have many good bonds with him. I thought he was a very selfish, cold, calculated man. He did have a terrible, terrible mental illness, and schizophrenia is awful. It's absolutely dreadful. Yeah. My dad had about 4 different voices telling him what to do, and at any time, really telling him to kill people around him. Me, my children, his wife, Yeah. But the system was failing him too. So I feel sorry for anyone who was afflicted with any mental health injury.
Yeah.
But when it came to the crunch of looking for my mum, he had plenty of opportunity to tell us what he'd done, to show where he buried her, and he did enough on the day she was murdered in 1973, again in 1982, and right throughout my contact with him, enough to cover his own back to remain free.
Yeah.
So he's also calculated, and in my opinion, pretty evil.
So the time that he took your brother to essentially dig up your mum, that was completely false.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he thought your mum was there. You think he just invented this story?
No, I think he really believed she was there. He really, really believed that's where she was. It was a beauty spot. He'd gone firstly with his lover, Eric. They used to camp there and go. And then later on, when they both got married, they took their twin girls married there. Right. It was a favourite beauty spot. It was his... He took us as kids, but I hadn't realised anything about it, you know.
Of course. Do you have any... I was just sorry to interject, Joanne. Do you have any theories as to where your mum is?
Well, on the night she was murdered, in my recollection of seeing my dad the next morning, I don't think he'd gone up to Bywell and buried her, because he'd have been covered in mud, and he was still fully dressed. He's very white. I think she was in the garage at the time. And actually, there's three places that I always suspect. One is where he said, and it hasn't been dug properly. And after this amount of time, maybe the river has changed course and washed the body away. But the police won't let me access the files and things, despite being a police officer, etc., etc. They're withholding a lot of information about the quality and the extent of the dig they did there. I also think that my dad had access to a local power station. That was because he was a security man there, and it's still active at that point. And of course, we lived literally on the area where the A1 now is. So the arterial route up to Scotland was being built at the time, and I have old photographs showing the pipes and things. You know, my dad's house, he was kicked out of the house eventually because they were steamrolling the A1 that now is through the Western Bypass, we call it. So it would have been very convenient to take a body from the house and stick it down in one of those drainage places.
Knowing that it would be buried for forevermore. Yeah, indeed.
Forever.
Listen, Joanne, I mean, I'm sure your journey and your search doesn't stop, and I'm grateful for you being on with us. I will urge people to listen to the podcast. Thank you for being with us, Joanne Mackle, whose mother, Anne Law, vanished in 1973. What an extraordinary story, and how you carry on through life battling with all of that. And that's just one element, as she said there. There were many other factors to this as well. The podcast is called Dig Up Your Mum. There's a reason for that. That was the instruction the dad gave to his son. Turns out not to be correct information. It's presented by Julie Bindle, as she said. Seek it out and have a listen to the fuller story. Now, CrimeCon, of course, which is exactly what this feature is in association with. Had a very successful weekend in London. Next CrimeCon hits Manchester, September the 27th this year. If you enjoyed today's episode, remember you can download it and listen to all the Talk Crime episodes and podcasts on your favourite podcast app. This is Talk.
lesson that I take from my experience in this is that keeping people informed accurately and in a timely way is absolutely key, and that includes members of Parliament. I've been contacted by people that I've worked with, professional colleagues and constituents who are currently stuck in Israel, and the thing that comes across over and over again is that they're getting conflicting advice. They're being told to move to Egypt or Jordan while simultaneously being told to stay put.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And this one from D, is it D? Who says, I grew up at Brize. This is reference to the Brize Norton story. It's a bind going in through the gates, but go round the perimeter, and it's a different story. Only got to look at Google Earth. We're always going through the fence to go fishing, as there's a brook that runs under the runway, catching rabbits, piece of, getting in there. No hassle at all. Although a previous caller told us that it was quite a difficult place to get into and couldn't imagine how someone would get there. Although I don't think these people went through the fence. They drove in on a flipping e-scooter. You can't make this up. Peter Cargwell is with us. He's on drive in a few moments, fresh from canoodling with the PM, but you take the
canoodling.
Canoodling's not the right word.
I don't think it isn't the right word.
What was the word I was trying to reach for?
Interviewing?
Well, I knew you were interviewing him. Yes, I get that. Yeah, having a powwow, a get together.
You're right.
A brainstorming.
Conflab.
No canoodling. But it's going to be a busy show.
Sure is, and I think those questions about how those pro-Palestinian vandals got into Brize Norton are going to be very, very interesting to get into. Also, we've been following the story about the Brits, I know you have too, about the Brits who are stuck in Israel as well, trying to get out. Now the government has finally acted and is putting a mercy flight, a repatriation flight there, but it won't actually operate, it won't fly back until Israel airspace is open. Goodness knows when that's going to be. We'll talk about assisted dying, of course. Andrew Bridgen, MP, will be in the studio. He's a Shadow Defence Minister. He is also someone who voted against assisted dying. We'll have people who voted for it as well. We know there's been death threats of MPs as well in regard to all of this. We'll talk about that. We will also talk about the Iranian embassy in London, 6 people arrested there, and the heat, I don't know if you've noticed, is pretty warm, Ian, so yellow storm warning has been issued, the UK heat wave intensifying, but it's only got up to about 32 degrees so far today, whereas in 2022 it was about 40 degrees, so it's not nearly as high as it was, but it still feels pretty high. And also, what on earth is going on at BBC Breakfast? Front page of The Sun today about their presenter Naga Munchetty, hauled in by bosses over allegations she bullied a junior staffer and made an off-air sex jibe. That is something that we'll be talking about with the deputy TV editor of The Sun, and also her boss, the boss of BBC Breakfast, senior executive Richard Frediani. Lots of allegations against him as well. Is this just the latest in a long line of problems for the BBC? And we'll take an exclusive peek inside The Sun as well. John Lucas, the night news editor, will be here with us. Usually speak to John on a Friday, see what's in the paper and see what exclusives they have up their sleeves for the Saturday edition.
When you spoke to the Prime Minister, I know you used to do a feature about cats, didn't you?
Yes.
And the reason I ask this is because I know you're putting some stuff together about this.
Yes, doing a book.
You're doing a book, which you've mentioned before. Is he an owner of a pet?
He has 2 cats. So he has an 9-year-old rescue cat called Jojo, who's a boy, and also a little kitten called Prince as well, who's a sort of pedigree. And of course, Larry is still there. Larry is still.
He's not claiming to own Larry.
No. Larry belongs to Downing Street, which is good. And in fact, it's been interesting doing the book because I've interviewed people right from when Larry came in 2010, 2011.
The Larry years.
The Larry years. He's been there quite a while. He's an older cat now, but no, Keir Starmer's made clear that he actually said to me yesterday about how world leaders